Due to the graphic nature of the personal accounts and content discussed in this podcast, listener discretion is advised. Many episodes will include graphic personal accounts and discussions of child sexual assault, domestic violence, physical abuse, rape, sexual situations, and suicide.
Oh my child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Latter-day Survivors. I'm Christina. I'll be hosting your episode today, and I'm very excited about the guests we've got with us today. Today, we are speaking with a wonderful person. Her name is Sister Teeth. She is a musician, a talented musician, I might add, with a beautiful voice. She was raised in the Mormon church and went through a faith crisis and has a story to tell us. And I know that some of her story is even told through her music. So I'm excited for everybody to hear what she has to share with us. So welcome to Latter-day Survivors.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm excited.
Nervous is normal. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really funny though, because I feel like I've talked about doing a podcast with my spouse before, and I was always like, well, I don't really know what I would say. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like everybody kind of feels that way about their story, is like, well, yeah, I did have a faith crisis, but mine's not that exciting or whatever, you know? But then I sat down with him and started okay, I'm doing this podcast. What would I say? And a lot came out. Actually, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's surprising, isn't it, how much actually comes out when you start to think about it. Well, and I think that's part of the beauty of storytelling, too, is that, because I thought the same thing when I told my own story. I kind of felt like, oh, my story is not trauma-y enough, or, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. But as I began to tell it, I realized I'd been through a lot more than I thought I had.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So I guess I'll just start with my story.
Okay.
I guess a little bit of my background. So I grew up with 4 sisters. So kind of a crazy household. 4 sisters, no brothers, parents. We moved to Mesa, Arizona when I was 8. So I moved from California to Arizona. Lots of Mormons in Arizona. Was not used to that.
Yeah, I actually live in Arizona now, and I can confirm that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So
I'm actually in Mesa.
Are you?
I
Okay.
am.
Yeah. That's funny. Yep. That's where I lived. I mean, that's where I say I grew up, even though I, lived there when I was 8. But
yeah,
that's where I grew up. So very heavily Mormon populated, a very specific type of culture to fit into. I think, a lot of wealth. A lot of my friends were wealthy. We were not. So it was just a lot of, just a lot of pressure growing up. Then let's see, I think I was around 12. My parents separated for a while. Honestly, the timeline is fuzzy in my brain. I don't I don't really know the exact amount of time, but it was definitely like a little while. That was obviously a very difficult time for me and my family, but I felt a lot of like embarrassment and a lot of shame because I felt like we were in a lot of ways ostracized by our
Mm-hmm.
ward and like the
Yep.
community that was supposed to be very supportive. And some people were, but like I would just remember, and I was young, so, my perception may have been skewed a little, but my perception was that the ward we were in was very like, I don't know, I just felt like we were not taken seriously. We
Mm-hmm.
were just kind of left to hang. Um,
Yeah.
and that was hard. Like, I was like, I think by that time I was 13, and I feel like I felt that, very strongly from a lot of, especially like the grown, like women in the ward.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, that's so weird to me now, being older and like looking back on it.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know, that's
And
something I'm still processing in
well, and it's
therapy.
such a 12, 13 is such a pivotal time in the church for young women too, because that's when you start getting all those lessons about marriage and eternal families. And so when your family doesn't fit the mold, it kind of, you automatically feel that you're different.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
remember going to girls' camp that summer, kind of after
Mm-hmm.
things have, like, my parents had got back together, but we still were ostracized in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah.
so everything had sort of resolved, but the ward still viewed us poorly.
Mm-hmm.
We went to girls' camp. I was with my younger sister at the time, and one of the activities we were doing was like, you had this wooden board and you wrote something that you wanted to like be free of or get past or something like that. And then we would break through the wooden board with our palm.
Mm.
And I remember like I wrote on the back of mine like my family, because I was just so, and like I felt a lot of shame, and that's like so
Wow.
sad. I'm like, that's really sad
Yeah.
to think about now.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like so entrenched in all of it all the time. And yeah, I just felt like really judged by the community that was supposed to be very loving
Mm-hmm.
and just, supportive and supposed to be there for us. So
Yep.
yeah, that was a hard time to go through. Um yeah, that was difficult.
I felt that too because I grew up in a not intact family too. So
Yeah.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
And the messaging is just that this is something I've been struggling with lately with the church. I feel like I'm in a pretty good space with it, with the church as a whole now. But
Mm-hmm.
this aspect of like families are forever, happy families, like you have a mom and a
Yep.
dad and kids, and like this is how you're going to be together. It's the only thing that matters. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm just like, that is such fucking bullshit,
Yep.
honestly.
Yep.
Like, I
That it
just feel
has
like,
to look this way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it just set us all up for disappointment in a lot of ways. Because, like, my
Mm-hmm.
parents are no longer together. They divorced a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think they're happier now, which is it's great. I'm happy for them. But I don't, it just, like, when I grew up, I got married, I have my own, like just me, my spouse, and my dog, my own
Mm-hmm.
family unit. And my immediate family just is not the picture that the church told me it would be.
Right.
And I mean, I love them all, obviously, but I'm just mad, It's like, this is not, I don't know. I think it just sets us all up for disappointment that I'm like, oh, everybody's family has issues.
Yep.
Everybody's family is a little dysfunctional in one way or another. And like,
Yep.
you're just not prepared. They did not
No.
prepare us for that, for realistic
Well, because we
pictures.
were never allowed to talk about it either, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you kind of were supposed to keep your dysfunctions quiet,
Yeah.
make the appearances. Everybody's families looked so perfect on Sunday
Yeah.
and when you're growing up, you sort of buy into that. But when you're an older adult, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, if that family looked so perfect on Sunday, it makes you wonder like what skeletons were in the closet that came out the
Yes.
other
And
6 days of the week.
exactly. And I mean, I think that's why our ward at the time was so uncomfortable and, like, didn't know how to interact with us maybe because like
Mm-hmm.
we had it on display, like our
Yep.
imperfections on display. And that's, no, you don't talk about that. You don't show those imperfections.
That's actually really a kind of profound thing you just said that I hadn't really thought of until you worded it that way. That
Mm-hmm.
your issues were on display. That everybody else, like depending on what your issues were, you could sort of keep those under wraps. We only talk about that when we're at home. Nobody has to know. But when your family is quote unquote broken, and I use that term in air quotes that people can't see, because now we know that that's not what that is, but that's what we were taught, that your family was broken. There's no hiding that. When
Right.
everybody knows your business, everybody sees it all, and you can't get away from it.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating too because I mean just right now when you're talking about what broken is and what it isn't, like my I don't know how to say this. So my family right now technically broken, right? My parents are
Mm-hmm.
divorced, they're both remarried, um and they're so much happier,
I was just
like
gonna say, but are they happy?
they're so much happier than they were together, and they stayed together for 25 years. I think a lot of that was just, first of all, for the kids. I think they stayed together for us. They
Yep.
waited till, most of us were moved out. But
Mm-hmm.
second, just the pressure and the image and the status, that you
Mm-hmm.
get from being a whole family, a whole in air
Yep.
quotes, in the church.
Yep.
And and
Well,
also they
there's
just
also this. No, go
oh,
ahead. Sorry.
sorry, just like the eternal families thing. You're sealed
Yep.
together. That's a lot of pressure to keep unhappy people
Mm-hmm.
together.
It's a ton of pressure. And there's also this underlying message that you get all the time that if you get divorced, you've somehow failed. Like it's this never give up attitude. Never give up, never give up. Make it work. Keep praying. If you're not happy together, it's because you're not doing something or nurturing the relationship enough. Whereas really it's just like maybe like normal humans, we grow up, we evolve, and we might be growing in different directions. And I'm always saying now, like, why do we vilify divorce so much? Why not? Why couldn't it just be this healthy, like, hey, we've had a great life together, or maybe we haven't, but we're evolving and growing in different directions. And why not make everybody happy and nurture this family by honoring our pathways, even if they go in different directions?
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
But
Yeah, totally.
but we don't.
We don't. No. And
No.
and it's sad. Like I mean, maybe I'm getting too much into my parents' lives, but I just feel like that would be sad to me to feel like I was, I don't know, like stuck maybe. I don't know if they felt that
Yeah.
way, but stuck in an unhappy marriage for
Mm-hmm.
so long,
Yep.
like a
And
really,
it's not fair to
that's a long
anybody.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like it kind of skewed my perception of what a marriage should look like when I got married myself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anyway, so that definitely impacted my own relationship with my spouse.
Yeah.
But so I got married at 18. I was 18 years old. My spouse was a missionary for the church in Mesa. So that's how we met.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um and I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, this is weird now that I say this out loud, but like all growing up, it was always a joke that a joke in air quotes, serious. We were
Mm-hmm.
serious that I was going to get married young.
Okay.
Like, that's weird to like have that in your
Mm-hmm.
mind as a teenager, But I just
Yeah.
feel like I was definitely primed, like all young girls are in the church, to be
Yep.
a wife and a mother. That's all I was
Yep.
taught. Like,
That's your
I, t-
highest calling.
yeah, that's the only value I can bring, right? That and
Mm-hmm.
like being of service to other people, which is not a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
but like motherhood, being a wife, I remember
Mm-hmm.
young women's all all I wanted to do was like, I was like, can we go play basketball with the boys? Can we, you know what I mean? I was like, I don't want to decorate another journal. I don't want to learn another meal. Like, I
Yep.
hated that stuff. I
Yep.
fought against a lot of aspects like of the church back then without really knowing. Like, now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that was me pushing back,
Uh-huh. It's
against
interesting how
what I
you can
felt
see
uncomfortable.
that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Like, I was always called to like seminary. Oh, what is it even called now? President, I guess. Seminary president and
Oh, yeah.
whatever that, and like young women's, uh, the leadership in there. And I was like, why? I don't want this. Like, don't give it to
Mm-hmm.
me. I hate it because I hated seminary. I hated anything
Mm-hmm.
extra, really. Like,
Yep.
I
Yep.
didn't like going to girls' camp. I didn't like going to young
Mm-hmm.
women's. It just, I don't know. It just didn't sit with me.
Well, and then, but then also you were also raised in a paradigm that told you you couldn't say no to those callings either, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Explicitly, my parents told me that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cannot say no to calling. So, of course, I
Right.
said yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Hated it so much. Um, but, I did it because in my brain as a teenager, preteen, there was nothing else. There's no other option. No, like, this is just how you live. This is just how it goes.
Right.
This is the reality that was presented to me. And I have no reason to believe that there's another reality. I didn't even know that that was a possibility to think that there are other realities, you know?
Exactly. And that is a key point that so many people on the outside of this don't understand. When all you're raised with is this set of rules, this paradigm, this box, you don't even know what's on the other side of it, that there's any other possibilities that you could, like, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming you were never raised to believe that you could be a high powered career woman if that was something you wanted to do, or dive into music and focus on that. You're
Yeah.
right. It's just this, like, you don't even realize the possibilities out there. My own ex-husband, it's just this bringing back a memory. I remember him saying when he was growing up that he kind of wanted to be a doctor, but nobody ever really told him that that was an okay thing to do. And I know that sounds strange to some people. Like, why do you have to have permission? When you
You
grow up a
do.
certain way, you kind of do.
You
Yeah,
do.
you really kind of do.
Because you are not taught that you are your own authority figure.
Uh,
You are
yep,
you are nothing without God. You are nothing without
100%.
the Mormon church.
Yep.
And I actually, yeah, this is a big, big, big thing I've been struggling with lately that I was planning on, talking about in later down the road, but here we are. Let's talk about it. Um,
Sure.
yeah, I this is this is so hard for me as an adult now,
Mm-hmm.
making decisions and trusting myself. Like, I just started a new job.
Mm-hmm.
Deciding to leave my old job was agony for me. I
Mm-hmm.
was so anxious for like months, but I was clearly miserable in my old job. Like, having panic attacks at work, like, just it just wasn't working. My body was telling me no. And I just was like, I have to make a change, but like how? How do I know if it's the correct one? I have no like
Yep.
being telling me yes, no, this is the way you're supposed to go, this is your end destination, so this is how you get there. I don't
Yep.
believe in that anymore, like at all. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe that
Mm-hmm.
there's somebody in heaven telling me that I have a certain path. It's like I make
Mm-hmm.
my own path.
Yep.
Whatever I want to have happen, I can make happen. But it
Yep.
was so terrifying. Like, this is the
Mm-hmm.
first big decision I've made outside of being not Mormon anymore, being outside of the
Mm-hmm.
Mormon church. And I was just like, oh my God, I have no
Yeah.
idea if this is correct. Like, this is
Yep.
scary. But it's really empowering, like, at the same time, to feel like you have control over your life. And even though I know there's a million other factors in the just other people making a million decisions every day that impact my options or like my path,
Mm-hmm.
but like the power and the choice comes from me and me
Yes.
alone. Like I do have authority to make decisions for myself.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, I know that, right? Like I say that out loud, I know that to be true, but it still is just the conditioning is
Mm-hmm.
really strong still. So
Mm-hmm.
it just fights against those thoughts and things that I know to be true. It's hard. You're so
Yeah. It is
conditioned.
hard. You are. And I will say, and you probably know this already, but sometimes it's good to hear, you are not alone. Like, this is the overarching theme I hear from people all the time through this podcast, through, I run my own Instagram account aside from this podcast as well. In fact, that's how you and I connected.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say that at the beginning, but I think I posted a story or something that you liked, and I clicked
Mm-hmm.
on your profile because I liked your name. I thought it was cool.
Oh,
That's how I
thanks.
figured out who you were, and then I started following you and we started kind of talking a little bit. But this is the overarching theme I hear from everybody is, how am I supposed to figure out how to make decisions and how to trust myself when my entire life I've given that authority to this outside source, this Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit or God. And now that I am not believing in this anymore, people feel directionless and they feel kind of lost.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I have come to, just for my own, I'm not saying this is the right way for anybody else, but kind of what brought me some peace is, one day I figured out that all those times I'd been praying and I had received these answers that felt good, it hit me one day that those were actually all coming from me, that they
Mm-hmm.
weren't coming from the Holy Ghost. And so I could actually continue doing what I had always done, which is quote unquote pray, but rather than pray, meditate and talk to myself about it. And when those same feelings come up of this feels right, what do they say, burning in the bosom, this
Yeah.
feels right, or stupor of thought, this doesn't feel right, that's actually my own inner authority saying this is the right decision, this is not the right decision. And I have trusted that my whole life. I just thought it was coming from the outside, but really it was me all along. And that was
Mm-hmm.
very empowering because I realized all of a sudden, hey, you know what? I'm kind of badass. Like, I've
Yeah.
actually been making these decisions myself all along. I was just giving the credit to some invisible outside source. And so
Yeah.
if it helps, I would say maybe sort of kind of view it that way. Like, you can still get all these feelings and quote unquote pray. I hate that word. It's very triggery for me now. I choose
Mm-hmm.
not to use it. But I'm also trying to reclaim a lot of words,
Yeah.
because the church doesn't have a monopoly on those things. But yeah, that was hard for me too. And it started by making these just little tiny decisions here and there, and learning to make a small decision and trust, and then make another decision and trust. And then it became easier and easier. But like you said, the conditioning runs deep. And I am actually, I was, people couldn't see because I was making faces, but I was really getting kind of, you know, I was really resonating with what you were saying about this idea of switching jobs. I'm going through something very similar right now.
Oh.
And the anxiety, you are not joking, is real. It's so real. And as I deconstruct and I get so far in my deconstruction and feel so confident, things like this happen and I get sucked back and I realize how deep the conditioning goes. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not as far along as I thought I was, because this fear has really got itself in me. I wanted to ask you, how far removed years wise are you from the church?
Oh, okay. Well, I think my, like, officially I am done was January 2021. I was
okay, so relatively
out.
new.
Yeah, I think I was kind of out like probably 6 months prior, but well,
Okay.
mentally, right? But
Yeah.
physically done 100% was January 2021. Okay. So yeah, still quite
it's very
new.
fresh.
Yeah.
You and I aren't that far off, because my sort of, I say officially I'm done, was like July of 2020. So,
okay.
I was kind
6
of
months.
physically done when you were kind of about mentally done. And yeah. So it's new. It's very new. When you think about this was our entire lives for years and years and years. To only be out for that long is just, we're babies. We're babies. Exmos.
And it's like not even just that it was our life, right? It was our reality, like our perception, everything
of
we knew and thought and felt was framed and shaped by the Mormon church.
Mormonism. Yep.
Oh, it's crazy.
Every single decision that we made had that in the back of our head. I mean, down to what clothing you wore on a really subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and you can feel free to share or not, if you ever went through the temple or were married in the temple, if you ever had to wear garments, but like just the daily, what clothes do I wear? Even when you're in the store buying clothes, like you don't even think about it on a conscious level. You're just going through racks of clothing, and subconsciously you're like, oh yeah, that would show my garments. Can't be that. Nope. Next. Or that's, those pants, those shorts aren't long enough, or that shirt's too, that the cap's on those sleeves, that's not going to be good enough. Every little decision we make is framed in that Mormon lens.
Yes. Yep. And I did go through the temple. We did get married in the temple, the Mesa temple.
Okay.
Yeah, that was an experience, and it's, just the temple. But totally, like literally everything is shaped by it. And like, that's the hardest part when I talk to people, because obviously, so now I'm in California. That's where I live. And, there are a lot of people who are not Mormon and who know nothing about Mormonism. And so when it ever comes up, which it does, because they'll ask me like, do you like to drink, or, whatever. And I'm kind of like, well, I still don't know that much, or, you know what I mean? So I kind of, we start talking about it, and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. And that's the hardest part to explain to people, is like it's so much more complicated than just deciding not to go to church anymore. Yes. It's rewiring my whole brain. Yes. Like literally really everything that I think and feel, and I have to go behind each thought and emotion and see what element of the church is tied to that and rework it.
That's another like really profound thing you just said.
Yeah. It's
so true.
It's entangled in everything. So it's been a very tough and rewarding, I think, 2 years, almost 2 years. It's interesting, but in a lot of ways, like I don't know, it's so hard, but in a lot of ways I'm just so happy to go through it all, and to like feel like my own person.
I always say it's the hardest and best thing I've ever done. I mean, hardest. I mean, because you just summed it up. Like, it's a whole total brain rewiring, and that is not easy. You have to, because first you have to admit that you were wired and indoctrinated and see it. And then you have to go through the work of untangling it all. And like you said, when we were in the church, every single thing was through that lens. But then when you're out of the church, it's still all through that lens a lot of times. And you have to stop yourself all the time and say, is that really what I want to do? Or is that Mormonism speaking to me? Is that my decision, or was that my Mormon wiring that's deciding that? And it can be very challenging.
Yeah. I always say, oh, that was a Mormon thought. Rewind. Let me do that again, Yeah. Yeah, it's good though. And I don't know. It's exhausting at the same time.
It is.
Yeah. Anyway, let me rewind a little, because I feel like I want to go back to the temple stuff.
I got you off track. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I mean, it's great. I love to talk about all this, but we got married. I was 18. He was a missionary. That's how we met in Mesa, but like, he was from Utah. So I actually went to Utah, saw that he was home, invited him to dinner with my family, and we just kept talking and dated long distance from there. We were, started dating at the end of January, married by September that year.
Very Mormon thing to do.
Very Mormon thing, yeah. Which I cannot believe sometimes. We laugh. George and I, that's my spouse, we laugh about it a lot together. We're like, what the hell were we thinking? Like, that was insane. We're still together. I think we really lucked out, honestly, that we're just really good friends.
So is he also outside of the church now, or is he still in?
No, he's out.
He's out too.
Yep.
Okay.
So we got married. We were actually on a TV show when we got married called Teenage Newlyweds. Yeah. It's not a good show. I don't recommend it.
Okay.
But I remember, like, the stake president or something. I don't remember exactly how they got involved, but they were like, they came over to my house and they were like, we don't think you should go on this show. And they really they did not want us to do it. But we were like, they're going to pay us and we're newlyweds. We're going to do it, Like, we need money. And also we were like, oh, this will be a great opportunity for, like, the church to be presented, like, in normal day. Like, they'll see how normal we are, and, like, it'll be such a good thing. Like, we can convert so many people. Yeah. And because my patriarchal blessing actually talked about how I would convert a lot of people. So I was like, this is it. This is my moment, Like, wow, I am being entrusted with such a great duty here. Like, that's what I thought. Like, how arrogant was that, And just, makes me cringe now that I'm just like, Anyway. So we did the show. It was not a great show. Not very many people saw it. It blew over pretty quick, and that was it. That was that. So nothing ever came of it. But I was just so bothered that the church representatives, like, did not want us to do it. I was like,
so that's so patriarchal. That they can come in and tell you, like, that they have this authority over you, that they can come in and tell you what to do with your adult life.
But also, like, what were you afraid of? Why couldn't I do it? I was a good, air quotes here, good, worthy, like, Mormon who did what I was supposed to. Like, why can't I do this?
Right.
And that was, I've always been very stubborn. Like, I was talking about how I just fought against all these things, like seminary young women's. I just fought. Like, if you tell me no, I'm going to fight you, fight back on that,
Good for you. It got you out early.
It did. Yeah. You know, my husband makes fun of me, but he calls
Right.
me the bulldog. He's like,
Uh-huh.
I say yes, sorry, like so quickly, and you are the bulldog. And he's like,
Yeah.
we need that. So I'm very
Yes.
grateful for it now. But it did get me into a little bit of trouble growing up, I think.
Sure.
But yeah, so that whole show, it was stupid. Move on. So when we got married, we moved to Utah like immediately, like the next day or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which was difficult because I went from living with my parents to living without any of my family around, which I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do that, but my family was very close at that point. We'd gone through a lot of trauma together, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
And when everyone else ostracized us, I think it brought us closer in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any of my sisters would I don't know if they would agree with that, but in my perception, that's what it felt like. So we were really close. Um, and so leaving was really hard. I don't know, it was good. It was good for us, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we lived in Utah for a few years. We actually uh, bought a home in Saratoga Springs. Like we built a house. We were like, we're going to live here for 10 years. We're going to live here for
Mm-hmm.
so long. We're going to bring home our first baby here. And like, this is where we're going to be. Um, well, we hated it. It was horrible when we actually lived there. And after living there for only a year, we actually moved to
Wow.
Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so somewhere totally different, but it was for George to go to school. He went to Johns Hopkins out there. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, pretty cool.
Is he
So,
studying to be a doctor or
he's a therapist.
a
So,
therapist? Oh,
clinical mental health counseling was his degree.
oh, amazing. We need that.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool person in my opinion to be able to take on other
Yeah.
people's shit. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we moved out there in 2018 and like we were both just like we wanted to go, which I find really fascinating now, like looking back, because I was still deeply entrenched in church,
Mm-hmm.
like it was not even a question that I would ever leave. And
Right.
so to think like that I was just like wanting to get out, wanting to get away from the culture and just do something different and unique, because up to that
Uh,
point we were just doing what we were supposed to do, like the Mormon life map that is given to you.
yep. It's
And
prescribed.
yeah, and it's, doesn't take a whole lot of conscious thought and conscious decisions to just do what everyone else before you has done.
And that's what
And
they want you to do.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like that was our first like taking control of our life
Mm-hmm.
decision. And so we went. And at that point, I didn't know yet, but George was pretty much mentally done with the church.
Ah.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still very much in. But at the same time, now having these experiences outside of the bubble, right? Because I went from Arizona to Utah, both bubbles, Mormon
Mm-hmm.
bubbles. So outside of the bubble, just meeting and working with some like really amazing people who I never would have met, had I stayed in Utah or
Yeah.
Arizona, and just like seeing, this sounds so silly to say now, right? As a grown adult, I was 20 something, 21, 22 at the time, but I was like, "Oh, these people are genuinely happy, and I know they're
Yes.
good people.
Yes.
It's like just the kindest people, and they
Mm-hmm.
live extremely different lives than I do, and they're still good
Yep.
people and they're still happy. Oh, I didn't know that
Yes.
existed. Like you would think, duh, yeah, like you're taught that in the church that like um I feel like you're taught both things, that you can't be happy without the church, but obviously we don't judge other people, and like, yeah, you can live without it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, kind of that made me think, because growing up, kind of what I was taught, maybe it's a combination of what I was taught versus maybe just my own thoughts, but it was this idea that, like, oh, here's an example. Growing up, we were always told there was a difference between happiness and joy. So can you live happily out of the church? Yeah. There are people that don't have the gospel and they're happy, but are they actually joyful? They think that they're happy, but they're not. They don't realize how much more happy they could be if they had the gospel.
Yeah.
How much like more complete their life could be. And so even though you've got these happy, well-adjusted people who are going through life just fine with the life that they're living, let's go ahead and try to get them into the gospel, because we have this ethnocentric idea that we can make them more happy.
Oh yeah.
It's just all bullshit.
You're totally correct. Yes, that is, like, I completely forgot about that lesson until you just said it. I'm like, yep, I do remember learning exactly that. Yeah, but then at the same time, I think a lot about my family and my siblings, and how, like, I try to put myself in their shoes now. So I'm like, if I were to tell this to one of my sisters, that, like, you believe in the church that people can't live fully, like all the way fully without the church, she would be like, no, I don't really think so. Like, I don't think we're taught that. You know what I mean? Like, there's this cognitive dissonance where I feel like I don't know, you just like aren't really able to connect the dots until you leave.
Exactly. And it's that whole, I think about, who is it? Matisse, is it, that does the dot paintings? That, I don't know if you've seen the little, there's, anyway.
I've seen them. I don't know the artist though.
I think it's Matisse, but those paintings that are done with just these thousands and thousands of little dots. When you are up close, looking at that painting very up close, and you're kind of entrenched in it, all you can see are a myriad of dots. It isn't until you step far away from the painting that you don't see the little dots anymore. You see the entire picture. That's exactly kind of what you just described in talking to your sister. When you're inside of the church, inside the gospel, inside that paradigm, you're entrenched in the dots. So you see one picture and you assume that that's the whole picture, because that's all you've seen are all these dots. It isn't until you step all the way out and away and you can see it from far away that you're like, holy hell, this is a completely, I mean, I was up close and I didn't see any of this. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Oh my God. Yeah. That analogy is perfect. Like, gave me chills. I haven't heard it like that before, but that's exactly it.
I just thought of it based on what you said. So you.
Working as a good team. Okay.
I love it. Go team.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what it's like. Cause I mean, maybe I'm going a little off topic here, but I feel like I hear members, and specifically my family, a lot of the time, just because I'm so like sensitive about what they say. Like, they mean a lot to me, you know?
Yes.
So I hear what they say and I'm like, you have the dots. You have them. You're saying them. Connect them. Like, you're so close, you know?
You're so close.
You're so close. Anyway.
Yeah. But you can't. You can't make them. Yeah.
And
I think that's part of the thing
me.
It can't. And that is the most frustrating part. You know, I get people that will slide into my DMs and they'll say, hey, I've got a uncle, brother, sister, whatever. How do I make them see this? And my answer is the same all the time. I'm like, you can't. You have to let go of the fact that you can't. Somebody, I've heard this more than once, but feel like I keep hearing it lately, is like, the best thing you can do for your family is to be happy and live your best life. Because it just shows them over and over and over again, like, oh, she left and none of the stuff they told us came true. She didn't become an alcoholic. She didn't go to jail. She didn't lose her whole life. Like, she's actually thriving and happy. Maybe that's possible for me too, because we don't even know if our family members or friends are questioning, if they're in the same boat that we were, because they might not even realize they're questioning. I didn't realize I was questioning a lot of stuff until I got out. And
Me
B,
either.
they can't admit it out loud if they are, because there's so much danger around that. And
Yeah.
so I do really believe, like, live your best life. Just show people your authentic, happy self. And that's really the best way to sort of help people. But you're right. You're absolutely right. It can't come from you. It has to come from within, period. That's it.
Yeah, it has to. Because anything I would say to them, I feel like would drive them further into Mormonism.
Yes.
As a
They
defense.
double down. Yep. They double down because now, bad influence, apostasy.
Exactly.
Like, we can't listen to what you're saying because you're going to try to drag me down. So I've got to push you away. And so, it's hard. And I've said this in, it has.
Yeah.
I've said this in my own story too. So I don't want to be a broken record, but our church doesn't teach people to ostracize in like some religions do. I know in Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, they're taught if a family member leaves the fold, you actually cut them off. Our church, I feel like, is more sinister than that, because I say our church like it's still our church. Because see, there's another thing we learned, right? That's ingrained. I just caught myself saying that. Our church. I
didn't even notice.
Mormonism, right? Because that's brain wiring. The Mormon church taught us love everyone, accept everyone. In fact, it's in the Articles of Faith. Let people believe what they will, but they also teach don't associate with people that would bring you down. So they don't tell you to ostracize, but they just make it dangerous for you to do so. So you make that decision for yourself, which is actually more dangerous, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that has, I mean, that right there, you just summed it up. That has been the hardest part of this whole experience. Like, I can deal with my own brain rewiring, but it's so hard that I can't do anything about how my family sees me. And I know exactly how they see me because I was taught all of the same things they were.
Yes.
And I just, that's the most difficult part by far, is that I know they think I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy. And I'm like, I'm really not, you guys. I swear I'm happy. Like, the way that my brain works is not irregular, you know? And it's so difficult because, I mean, I'll touch more into this, I think, in a little while, but they of course have told me, like, you know, I love you no matter what. Right. But that's conditional. Like, that is a condition in itself. Like, I'll love you no matter if you do this wrong thing. That's a condition snuck in there.
That no matter what at the end is like the but. Exactly. I'll love you, but I'll love you if I'll love you. I'm saying I love you, but the no matter what delineates that there's still something wrong with you.
That I did
there's something wrong with you. Yep, that you did something wrong, but I'm gonna love you. And my ex-husband used to say all the time, whenever you say but, it discounts everything you said before it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And it's just this is something I've been working on in therapy a lot lately, is just like, they will not be able to fully see me unless they leave themselves. There's always going to be the invisible barrier of Mormonism between us.
Yep.
And I just feel a lot of grief for that reason. Like, I'm grieving my family and how we used to be.
Yeah.
And that just really sucks. You know, it just sucks. I think, but at the same time, like, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it sucks, but I want to just take a second and honor what you just said. You said, I'm going through grief. I'm grieving my family. I think that's such an important thing to admit, to say out loud. people need to understand this is a grief process, and grief is normal, and we have to kind of go through those steps of grief.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you've been through something like this, you don't really get it. And it's grieving. It's like a death of sorts, because really it's the death of the family the way you used to be. Mm-hmm. It's the death of the life that you used to live. Because in order to get out of this, really, a little part of you that part of you has to die, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, in order to find the person that you really are underneath all of it. It's grief.
Yeah.
And grief is hard. It's healthy and it's good. And getting to the other side of it there are great things about it, but it is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't actually know the year that it was finalized, but in 2017, I think, my parents started the process of divorce. So somewhere 2017, 2018, they were divorced, and it was a really nasty divorce. It was bad. It really divided. That's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was away for most of it, but it really divided my siblings and I for a while. You know, we were kind of forced to pick sides, and that was really bad. But anyway, so we drifted apart, and I think we're kind of getting back to the point just the last year or two where we all are very different. We're separate. We have our own separate lives now, but we are getting back to being close in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
Not as close as we were before the divorce. But better than the divorce. So I think we're starting to get back to that place, but then I threw the wrench in there, of like, I'm leaving, and so there's just there's a lot that's been going on with my family, and that's what I think about the most in this whole process. I'm constantly thinking about my family and how they view me, and how they feel, or how they would think about this. And I'm like constantly, like, I cannot get it out of my head. So I actually wrote a song about this. It's unreleased. It's not out yet. It will be eventually, but
I'm excited.
Yeah, I hope it turns out well, but it's about like grieving your old self and your old life, even though change and progression is good. It's a good thing. I'm happy that I've progressed.
Yes.
But it's just hard to grieve,
It's hard. And there's no way around it.
Because, even though my family went, on this roller coaster, up and down, like, they're still my family. They're still the people that I want to be close to. But at the same time, it's hard for me now. It's hard for me to be close to them because the church puts this invisible, the Mormon church. That's another thing I'm trying to stop giving it all this power by just calling it the church. The Mormon church puts a wall.
I love that.
Yeah. Yes. It's not the only church,
I love
it's just
that.
a church.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I am such a believer that verbiage matters. Words matter.
I agree.
What we say and call things, and all of it matters, because it's how we frame. You're right. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, so that has just been the most difficult part, I think.
Yeah.
Because, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to, it made me think too, when you say, I'm grieving my family, and the wall that's there. I know one of the things I hear from a lot of people too is there's also this underlying feeling of knowing of feeling, I'm going to use the word responsibility, but please know that it's not the person who's leaving, it's not their responsibility, but this feeling of responsibility that I have broken up the family. I have destroyed the eternal picture because I'm stepping out. And then also taking on this heaviness of knowing that because I want to live my best authentic life, I'm also the cause of grief to my family, and I'm the cause of them expending inordinate amounts of energy in prayer, in I know that they're praying for me to come back. And I just want to tell them, stop wasting your time. But again, you can't, you're not responsible for their feelings. You're not responsible for what they're doing with their own lives. But there is this heaviness that comes with, because I tell people all the time, I don't ever want to be the cause of someone else's discomfort. But the truth is, we're all going to cause discomfort for people. When you live your best, authentic, true self, you're going to disrupt things.
And I think that is a Mormon thought that you just said of like, I don't want to be anybody's cause of discomfort. That's
100%.
such a Mormon thought, right? Like we are bred to relieve other people's stress. And to say
we are supposed to bear one another's burdens.
Yep. And especially as women, we're bred to be nurturers, caretakers, and you don't say no. And you know, there's very unhealthy boundaries expected of us.
Possibly almost no boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
And don't murmur too. No murmuring while you're at it.
It's just incredibly unhealthy.
The family grief, it's both ways. It's you're grieving the loss of your family, and you're grieving the fact that you're causing them discomfort. And
yes, and this is exactly something that I have brought up in therapy before. That since the divorce, my mom and I don't really have the best relationship. I didn't really speak to her for a few years. I've been trying to reintegrate, you know. It's been difficult, but that is something that I have felt a lot of guilt about. Like, I know she's been through a lot of heartache in her life. Lots of different, you know, terrible things have happened to her. And I was like, I never wanted to be a source of that, like another heartbreak on her list. And here I am, like, I had to cut some ties for my own, you know, health for a few years and trying to reintegrate. But now I've left the church, and I know that's another source of heartbreak for her, you know, and it's just, as much as I'd like to say like, oh no, I can just, you know, make healthy boundaries, cut that, I don't feel it, you know what I mean? Like, that's not my problem. That's her problem. If it, you know, makes her sad or whatever, I don't know. But it still affects me. Yeah. It's something I definitely still feel guilt about.
It's brain wiring.
Yeah. That's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But yeah. So, I mean, I guess.
Sorry, I got you off track.
No, that's okay. Totally fine.
We went off the rails when you moved to Baltimore. If you need need a place, if you need a place to get back to.
There we go. Okay, yeah, let's start back there. But that's totally fine. Okay. I love these tangents. It like brings up a lot of shit, you know.
That's what we say all the time. That's why we say rambling is so good, because you make all these connections. It's there's Kendra, my one of my other co-hosts, she says this all the time. She's like, don't worry about rambling, because rambling makes the connections. And she and I will ramble with each other all day long because that's exactly what happens. We're connecting those dots.
Yes. Good for
there
you.
we go. Back to the dots.
Yes.
Anyway,
Perfect.
so
okay.
Baltimore.
All right. Yeah. So, we're living there. He's working in the community in mental health. So he's seeing a lot of stuff go down, and it's hard, but he opened my eyes to a lot of just, like, I don't know, just being compassionate towards other people, other lifestyles, other circumstances, because I was raised in a very traditional, very conservative home. Yep. So, I was Republican, whatever, because that's what I was raised to think. That's what the church, suggests pretty much. And
without suggesting it.
Yeah. Exactly. So I didn't have to think. I didn't have to think and make my own choices and decide what I believed in outside of church, just about the world.
Yep.
So moving to this new place, being introduced to new situations, new types of people, I was like, wow, I had some really fucked up thoughts about other people and other lifestyles,
Yes, Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so horrible to think about now, I was so judgmental. And I credit a lot of this to George, of just having my eyes opened, because I would say things and he'd be like, well, think about it like this, or consider this, or whatever, And of course, we were minority in Baltimore, mostly everybody is African American. And so 2020 happens, George Floyd, all like this Black Lives Matter protests and gatherings, and like just really seeing the impact and the pain and just the injustice and all of this, like right in front of me. Like, we were going to these protests and we were trying to immerse ourselves in it to understand it better.
Yeah.
And be a support and, all of that. And seeing my friends and family's reaction to that was a negative reaction. And I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand how you can sit there and say that. Like, this is happening. This is real. This is impacting real people. And then also COVID, and like how masking was such a,
Yep.
It was such
I'm a nurse.
Okay. I'm like, I can't
understand.
think of the word. Yeah.
I'm a nurse. Yeah. That was a huge, because I kind of officially sort of said I was done in July of 2020. So we are just like in the middle of the horrifying part of this pandemic. And I'm a nurse and I'm going to work every day and I'm seeing death in the hospital, and it is not matching what's going on outside in my conservative Arizona. All these people around me that are members of the church that are saying things like, masks are stupid and I'm not going to wear masks and I don't care. And the whole time I'm just thinking, wait a minute. What about love one another? What about, have I done any good in the world today? What about, I am my brother's keeper? Like, what about all these messages I heard about loving your neighbor and taking care of everybody around you? All I was seeing was me. It's all about me. If you make me put a mask on, my right is being violated. Instead of seeing, if I put a mask on, I can protect my elderly neighbor. I can do my part to keep our society intact.
Yeah.
That was a huge piece for me, making that leap to get out.
Yes.
Huge.
Yeah. Exactly. And like, I mean, I was on the East Coast during all this. It was not a question of if you were going to do it or not. Everybody was doing it. It was normal of masking
Yeah.
because, of course, that makes the most sense, you know?
Right.
And so I remember like calling one of my sisters and like talking about, oh my gosh, isn't this so crazy? Like my grocery store was wiped out and blah, blah, blah. And we got in a fight about masking, and she was
Yeah.
anti-masking, and I was like, wait, what? You actually don't think that we should do that? Like, it was just very strange to me. I was like, this isn't computing, you know? I was like, this does not make sense to me. And that was a big flag for me for some reason, that specific fight, that I was just like, what?
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get how you can argue against it. But then, oh, back up really quick. In 2019, so just before all this, probably 6 months before, George had told me that he didn't have a testimony anymore, but he was willing to keep trying. And I was like, obviously devastated, you know,
Yeah.
just crushed.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, like there's no way that there's not a God because X, Y, and Z, and like this is the true church. And I just really didn't hold space for him in that moment. Didn't know how to. We weren't taught to do that.
Right.
So that's going on through all of this. That's kind of in the back of my mind, you know, through all of this. I started kind of, you know, noticing hypocrisy and the sexism, especially in church. And then 2020, all this other stuff happens. We stopped going to church. Like, it was hard for me to be at church before this. I was having the cognitive dissonance really strong. But again, leaving was not an option. That was not going to be my solution.
Right.
So 2020 happens. We stop going to church, you know, because you can't. We're doing the at-home studies of the Book of Mormon, I think it was that year. And I remember we were like reading some, and I was like, this is kind of twisted. Like, this is kind of fucked up. Of course, I didn't say fuck then, but you know.
Right, because you were a good Mormon girl.
I was a good
we don't
Mormon
say fuck.
Girl. Exactly.
That's right.
But we were just, you know, just like the pieces were all there. All the dots were starting to get there, you know.
Coming together.
So I'm sure like 2020 was a huge catalyst. Just all this stuff that I was like, okay, I know now that this is where I stand with my morals. And all the people around me who are in the church and just the Mormon church itself don't align with my morals. Why? Like, why are they not the same? Because to me, my morals are making a lot of sense, you know?
Yep.
So then, let's see, I think it was like the end of August 2020, we moved from Baltimore to California. And
one coast to the other.
Yep, exactly. That was an interesting trip, but we made it.
Yeah.
Still in, you know, quarantine, so not going to church. We don't know anybody in the area we live. Like, it's just us two. So we're having a lot of discussions about church and like what we believe and how our beliefs are shifting, and I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? A lot of this is not aligning with me anymore. Maybe I just don't understand it fully. You know, maybe I'm just not getting it. So I'm going to do a lot of research, you know, specifically garments was what I was like, I don't understand. Like, I don't get it, but I don't want to just take them off. I want to make sure that I'm taking them off. If I take them off, that I'm doing it for the right reason, not just because I want to wear, quotes, immodest clothing. I don't like to say immodest now. I say non-garment friendly because that's made up. I
love that because verbiage matters.
Yep. And immodest clothing is the way that Mormons talk about it is made up. That's fabricated. So
correct. 100% could not agree more.
Yeah. So non-garment. friendly clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, yeah, is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
Non-friendly.
Non-garment friendly.
Okay. Yeah.
Non-garment friendly. Yep. You said it right.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, I was like, let me see if I can understand this, because I just, it just wasn't making sense. So then that started the research. And I
Mm.
started on church sites, I started
Oh,
on,
you started critically thinking.
yeah, and I just like, I wanted to make sure that I was doing it properly, so that
Mm-hmm.
nobody could say,
Yep.
well, so that nobody could invalidate what I found or the
Right.
conclusions I came to. So I
Right.
started in the scriptures. I started on gospel topic essays. I swear to you, I'd never been able to quote scripture better than I could in those several months, or not
Right.
even several months, probably like a month. Um,
Yep.
but I went deep, deep.
Yeah.
And I started, in the church approved sources. And then I was like, oh, they mentioned this in the church approved source, but they don't go into it. I'm going to Google this,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that led me to eventually like a Year of Polygamy podcast. Listen to that a lot.
Phenomenal.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Then eventually, Letter to My Wife, CES
Mm-hmm.
Letter, which I actually never finished CES Letter, but I listened to, let's see, I did about probably I want to say like a month of research, but like 2 to 3 weeks of like intense research, like just constantly. I couldn't think about anything else. And then I
Yeah.
read Letter to My Wife I
Mm-hmm.
listened to it in over the course of like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to it with George, and then it finished, and he goes, what do you think? And I just said, it's all fake. I'm done. Like literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, it's all fake.
Yeah.
And I think it
I just got
was, oh, go ahead.
I just got goosebumps when you said that. Just
Yeah.
yeah. I
It's just,
remember that same moment of waking up and being like, none of this is real.
I was just like,
It's
oh, it's
it's like
fake.
this
Yeah.
pivotal moment where there's life before that moment and there's life after that moment, right? It's like one of
Yeah.
those moments that just is a sharp turn in your life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was just like maybe a day or two later that like we were driving home from work because we carpooled at the time, just me and
Mm-hmm.
George. And we both were kind of like, I think we're dancing around it. And I think we need to stop dancing around it. And I think we
Mm-hmm.
should just be done. And we just decided together, like at the same time, that, like, yeah, we're done. And
Yeah.
like, I didn't put my garments back on. And
Mm-hmm.
that was it. And then a couple days, I think it was a couple days later, or maybe a week. I'm not a person that can pretend very well and like hide stuff very
Yeah.
well. So I was like, I have
Yeah.
to tell my family. I can't sit here and not tell them.
Yeah.
So I like drafted a letter, and I ended up just texting it to my family in a group chat because I was like, I can't wait for a letter to get to them.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they don't all check their emails, or I don't want to, I just want them to see it right away.
And
So
everyone's got their phones.
exactly. So I sent them the letter of like I know this is going to be disappointing, but I've been doing a lot of my own studying and research, and like I've come to the conclusion that I don't believe this is the one true church. But like, I hope you can respect that. Please don't send me material, like don't send me testimonies, don't send me conference talks.
I
Please
love that you
respect.
set a boundary. I
Yeah.
love that.
I was like, please respect that boundary. And but like, we still want to be there for you, so invite us to baptisms, invite us to temple weddings. Like, we can't go in, but we'll be outside.
Yeah.
And that was that. Sent it off, and my family they were mostly supportive. it was a lot of, I love you no matter what, you know? Um, I had one sister wait a little bit to respond to me. This is the sister I'm closest to, so it was nerve wracking waiting for her response.
Sure.
Um, she was just kind of like, well, of course I love you and you can do whatever you want with your life, but I can't say that I'm happy for you. Like, I'm sad.
Mm,
Don't forget Jesus and God and that they love you and
yeah.
like I love you too, basically. And I was like, well, not surprised, but there was like, that's sad. Like, it's, it's a bummer, but I understand her response, like where she's coming from, because I know what she's taught.
Yeah.
And then like my dad sent a very, very kind notice or letter, not letter, text back,
Mm-hmm.
just about, he's like, I know you, I know you're smart, I know that you care deeply about other people, like, I trust you, you're smart, like, I love you, pretty much.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that was, yeah, that was really touching. My dad is not a very emotional guy. He's not very open, sappy. And
Mm-hmm.
so that meant a lot to me. That was really nice to hear from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was mostly positive, as positive as it could be, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from my mom,
Oh
just
boy.
totally ignoring,
Oh no.
the boundary set. And
Yeah.
that made me really mad. That really upset me because it was not a very nice letter. I think she meant it to be nice, but,
Right.
it wasn't.
But she hasn't been taught the boundaries.
Exactly. And it was
Yeah.
condescending and you don't understand what you're giving up, that type of thing.
Yep.
I wrote her one back. Just,
Imagine that.
yeah, it's like you didn't respect my boundary, so I have to take a
Yeah.
step back, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we went camping a few weeks later and I burned the letter, which felt really good.
Oh, burning is my favorite thing on the planet.
Why is that so satisfying? It just feels good.
It feels really good. It's because I feel like when we burn things, it's a physical act of empowerment. It's a physical it's a physical way to put an end to things. When we write letters, they still exist out there. But when we take that letter and we burn it, symbolically, we're saying, I part ways with you. Like there's, and it's not just throwing it in the garbage, it's destroying it. It's making it so that it doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's, for me, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it felt really good. I think I don't think that she knows I did that, so might not.
She might now.
Yeah, she might. But I needed that at the time. I needed it.
Yeah.
I needed to
Yeah.
have a say in my life and have my boundaries respected, and it wasn't respected, and so I made it so. Yeah. So that was interesting. I think it was a little bit awkward, after that for a while with my family. I was pretty open about it on social media, because again, I am not a person that can just sit in it, and that's
Same.
totally like, I respect people who can, like, that's it. I don't know, whatever you need to do is great, like in your own journey.
Yep.
I cannot. So I've been
Same.
very open about it, which caused some rifts in my relationship with some of my family members.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, I try to be understanding about it, because we are taught, don't associate with people that are going to bring you down. So I get it, but
Yep.
it still hurts.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it probably hurts them to see me posting about or sharing about this negative journey or negative experience I've had with the church and
Right.
how, sorry, the Mormon church, and how the Mormon church is unhealthy and
Mm-hmm.
dangerous in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But that was empowering for me to find a community and to share about it through social media. Because I remember when I was first kind of starting to question things and I was feeling like an immense amount of guilt for having doubts and for not liking certain teachings, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
saw a post by Chelsea Homer. I think she's
Yes.
pretty, yeah, she's well known
Yeah.
on social media for being open
Yeah.
about her journey.
Mm-hmm.
And her post said, "Not all who wander are lost." Right? It's Tolkien quote.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just like got the chills when I saw it, and I immediately like I don't know why, but it felt like permission for me. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, like I'm not lost. I'm just
I'm not
searching,
lost.
you know. I'm just figuring it out. It's not a bad thing to want to know, and to have answers,
Yeah.
to want answers, you know. Like if
Mm-hmm.
there's a God, he would want me to do this. Like he would want me to find answers for myself.
That's exactly what I was thinking just now when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that was one of the things I came to. I was like, I kind of was like, okay, God, I'm going to put you to the test, because if you really are this loving God, this loving Father that really wants what's best for me, then I'm going to give myself permission to go ahead and look into all of this and dive into it. And if the church is still true, then I think it was one of the prophets, Monson maybe, had said, it's either true or it's not. And so if the church is really true, if the Mormon church, thank you very much, is really
Mm-hmm.
true, then everything I'm looking at and diving into shouldn't matter, because if the truth is the truth, it stands no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So there shouldn't be any harm with me looking into this, because if it's true, it's true. And if it's
Right.
not, I want to know.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
was like, this is, this gave me the confidence and the comfort, I guess, that I needed to
Mm-hmm.
find out for myself because I had never put in the effort, right, beforehand. I went to church, I did all the things. I didn't love it. I fought back against a lot of stuff in my youth, but again,
Mm-hmm.
there was no other option, no other reality. I had accepted that that is how life was going to be, you know? Like
Yeah.
I would have to do visiting, teaching, and relief society the rest of my life and not like it. But that's what it is, you know?
Yep.
So it was scary to want to do it for myself. That post gave me permission. So I felt like if I could do that for somebody else who was feeling lonely, feeling scared, guilty, shame, about having questions and just didn't have the confidence to figure it out, for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, maybe I can help. If I'm open about my experiences, maybe that I can do that for somebody else. So that's why I was very open about it for a long time on social media. And I did find a community of people. Like, it's crazy how many people are going through the same thing, and nobody knows because you don't talk about it because of
Yep.
all the guilt that they,
Yep.
the Mormon church makes you feel so guilty and unworthy for having doubts. Like, if you are having doubts, then your faith is shaking, and that's an issue
Mm-hmm.
with you. You need to pray
It's an
more.
issue with you. Yep.
Yeah, you need to read your scriptures more. You need to do X, Y, and Z more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that you're not doing. And of course, like we mentioned before, you can't let those imperfections show in the
Nope.
church. You can't.
Nope.
So nobody talks about
Yeah.
it. And
Nobody talks about it. It's interesting. One of the previous guests that I interviewed, when her interview was just getting started, she opened up with, I'm feeling really nervous about this. She had been out of the church for more than 20 years.
oh wow.
And there, as she sat down to record her story, that old feeling of, I can't talk any shit about the church came up. Like, I'm going against all the indoctrination I had when I was little that we're not supposed to say bad things. We're supposed, if you think a bad thing, you just keep it to yourself. Don't speak ill of the church. Don't speak ill of leaders. Don't speak ill of any of it. So we kind of cleared things, and then, she was able to tell her story. It was great. But that is the feeling that she started with 20 plus years after leaving, because nobody talks about it. And this is why we keep on saying there's two big reasons why I think it's important for people to tell their stories. Number one, first and foremost, it is for them. When Kendra says this all the time, I'm a broken record. I say it every episode. She's right. There is power behind going back and listening to yourself tell your own story in your own voice and validating your own inner authority. It's it's cathartic on a level that I cannot explain. But also, people need to know they're not alone. People need to know there is a whole community of people out there who are feeling the same things. You are not crazy. You are not alone. We are here for you, and we welcome you with open arms.
Yeah. And you are not wrong. You are not bad for wanting answers and for having questions.
Right.
I wish I knew that when I was younger, I wish I understood why I was fighting against things, but I did not even have the understanding that I could actually fight against things. You know what I mean? That I could figure out.
Well, and I just want to take a minute to also honor the fact that in some ways, perhaps that's protective, because when you are a child or a teenager, your very well-being depends on your caregivers. Even if you had figured out how to fight back, that was not a safe thing to do. You had to survive in the family unit that you were given. And I'm not saying that in a way to suggest that they were bad or abusive or anything like that. But there's this expectation that this is how we do things in our family. Yeah. We go to the Mormon church, and these are the things that we believe in. As part of this family, that's what you do. And so a lot of times as kids, we do what we have to do to survive. And it's subconscious, it's primal. We do it, our brains do it for us. They shut things down for us because the brain knows, hey, like don't kick outside that box, because that's not going to be a safe thing for you to do. Stay in the box, stay in the boat, So yes, I agree with you. I wish we hadn't been raised this way. I wish that we had been given the tools to think critically and be ourselves, but at the same time, wow, our bodies and ourselves are pretty amazing for knowing what to do to survive and get ourselves to a place where we could be independent,
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I'd never thought about it that way before. But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe like the pushback, right? Like I was pushing back on a lot that I, was expected to do. That was the only way I felt. Maybe that was me showing my independence from it in a safe way. Right?
Yes. And still keeping that girl inside alive. That I am still on a subconscious level. I understand that this isn't okay. I understand that I'm pushing back, not giving in completely, not giving away your authority 100%, retaining what you needed to retain to survive, and then get out and then have that part of you come alive and say, now we can really be free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally. Oh, that gave me
Yeah.
chills. Because I really felt like for a while I had just become so vanilla, for lack of
Yeah.
a better term, you know, like
Yeah.
I
Programmed.
I was
Yeah.
programmed. Like I
Yeah.
did have, you know, I've always been a little bit, okay, not a little bit. I've been stubborn, but as I
Mm-hmm.
got older and fell into the pattern of life that you're just expected to follow, I I really like did not make my own decisions like politically, or you know, like I pushed the dissonance under the rug when I would feel it, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't take control or make any of my own decisions. So
Yeah.
when I left, I became angry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Passionate,
Normal.
fiery,
Yep.
angry. But
Normal. Yep.
yeah, but it felt good to feel
Mm-hmm.
a very intense emotion and have very intense opinions for the first time, you know?
Yes.
And just like yeah, just feel passionate about anything, you know?
To just feel and
Yeah.
allow yourself to feel, because we weren't allowed to
Mhm.
feel a lot of those things.
We weren't allowed to be angry. We weren't allowed to say
Nope.
negative things. And now that I'm like, oh, I felt it so intensely all the time, which I
Yeah.
think is needed, right? It's needed to
Mm-hmm.
get you going and to make decisions
Yes.
and
Yes.
to survive outside of this
Yep.
organization that you were raised in. It got exhausting after a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, but through therapy and lots of discussions, I feel like I have controlled that anger now. It's still there.
Yeah.
It's not prevalent and fiery all the time. I can
Mm-hmm.
tap into it now, but I
Yeah.
just still feel very passionate about just being able
Now
to
you know how
make
to.
my own decisions and
Mm-hmm.
about what I believe,
Not
right?
now you know how to channel that anger. It's not. It's not
Exactly.
out of. It's not out of control anger. Now we can use it purposely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And just like decide for myself what I think, what I believe. And
Yep.
nobody else has to tell me, you know, which is just like
Nope.
been a very cool aspect of all of this is just coming alive. Like that sounds so corny, but it
No.
feels that way.
It's profound, because
Hmm.
remember we talked about this analogy of a part of you had to die.
Hmm.
Well, when that happened, now this part coming alive. This
Hmm.
is very symbolic.
Yeah,
You know, and there's so many people that say, you know, why do you have to be so angry? Why, you know, you leave the church, you can't
yes.
leave it alone. Why do you have to be angry? I say all the time, anger elicits change. Period. Anger was like, we had the civil rights movement because people got angry.
Hmm.
We had marriage equality because people got angry. We had equal rights because people got angry. Like, anger is not a bad thing. What you were just saying, out of control anger, that can be dangerous. But if you want to take passion and anger and channel it, you can do some pretty amazing things with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I just didn't even realize how subdued I had felt for so long until it was
Yep.
okay for me to not be. You know what I mean? For me to
Yeah.
just let all of the emotions fly and not feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I did channel a lot of that into writing. Like I wrote a song about like being raised in purity culture. That was my angry song, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a song. This song I actually just released this in August this year. Um, it's called "What Do I Believe In." This song was me. I when I realized I did not believe anymore. I sat down
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote this song, and it was me admitting to myself that I don't know I don't know anymore. I have no idea. I know this isn't correct, but I have no idea what I believe in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was scary and really emotional. And it felt good to like be able to channel the emotions into something physical,
Yeah.
into a representation that I can like revisit and feel those again
Yes.
and feel that emotion and remember what it felt like again and again. And yeah, and I remember just like writing this demo, and I was trying to record just like the shitty version of the lyrics, you know, and I was
Mm-hmm.
just sobbing. I was just
Mm-hmm.
bawling.
Can I share with you? I
Mhm.
I sobbed listening to that song also.
Oh,
Um, Makes me a little emotional now. It's a beautiful song. If just for our listeners, if you haven't heard it, please, if you're going through this faith crisis, please go and listen to this song. I resonated with it. I ended up putting it on repeat in my car one night. And when I got home, I just sat there in my car with it on repeat, just crying and listening to it over and over because I resonated so much with it, because you so beautifully illustrated what it's like to be in that liminal space, that space of exactly what you just said. I know that I don't believe in this thing over here anymore, but I'm kind of in this liminal space because I don't know where I'm going. I don't know, what do I believe now? What do I believe? And at first that can be so confusing. But as you start to just listen to that inner authority and keep going and giving yourself grace, you start to discover yourself. And it's really kind of
yes.
fun because you're like, I had no idea I could enjoy whatever it is, racquetball or what. I'm just saying, like, throw anything in there, because you just never gave yourself an opportunity to even
Yeah.
try something different. It's a really, really beautiful song. I love it so much. I'm so glad that you wrote it and released it.
Thank you so much for saying that. That I mean, I feel like that's the best thing I can hear from anybody that they
Oh,
resonated with it. So
yeah,
thank you so much for saying that. I
absolutely.
yeah, it I mean, it is very terrifying, right? That I was very scared in that moment that I wrote this, but at the same time liberated, because now I can only move forward from here. I can only move forward and up, and I can figure out for myself, which I think is so cool, but it is scary to start.
Yep.
And yeah, that's exactly what that song is just about. It's just being terrified, but also I've just opened the door to so many possibilities, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Have you always been musically inclined? Is this something you picked up after you left
um,
Mormonism?
I've always been into music.
Yeah.
My family would joke that I was tone deaf until I was about 8, and then I could just like sing really well. I don't
Interesting.
know if that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I grew up playing the cello from like elementary school on.
Wow. I
Um,
love the cello.
thank you. Yeah, I haven't been so good about playing it lately, but
Yeah.
um, I started writing songs in like 2019. That's when I really started
Wow.
writing. So still fairly fresh, new.
Yeah.
Um, but I love it. It has been the most helpful tool besides therapy,
Yeah.
and just processing literally everything, you know. So
Yeah. It's such a great way to um like put all those feelings. I'm a big believer in finding a creative outlet for whatever it is that you have going on inside. And it can be whatever: writing, poetry, music, dance, sports. Like, just find some way of getting what's inside out. You said something a minute ago about having a place where you can revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things I like to write also, not music, but just like I journal, and it's mostly my form of journaling.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I love about it is when I'm able to just word vomit into a document, my brain feels safe, not feeling like it has to remember every single little thing.
Exactly.
Because I have it externally somewhere, so I feel like I don't have to make as much space in my head for it. And that's not really a great way of saying what I want to say, but it's kind of the best verbiage I have to come up with. But yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying, though. I feel the exact same way of like, this idea, this issue, whatever it is, this topic is really exhausting me mentally and emotionally right now. Let's take it out and put it into something physical so it can live there. It's still with me.
Yes.
But it doesn't live in my brain all the time now. Now I can revisit this song or this journal entry or whatever it is, this painting, and I can listen to it, read it, look at it, whatever it is, and remember and like revisit these feelings. Now with a different light, right? Like now I'm not in that moment that I wrote this song and I was really struggling then, but I can honor that feeling. Yes, and I can look 100%. At it with a different perspective now. Mm-hmm. And it's still helpful and it still brings up other things. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's just nice to put it somewhere so it doesn't have to be floating around in your head. Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. That's
so
amazing.
I find that extremely helpful and also nerve-wracking. I don't know if my family has ever listened to that song or...
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Are they aware of all of your music that's out?
Yeah, they are. They listen. They listen to a lot of it. I know my nieces are big fans of a couple also like that listen to it a lot, and I know I think my mom listens, and so they do. They haven't said anything to me about this song, so I don't know that anyone has listened to it, or if they have, I have no idea what they think about it. To me, I put this out hoping that they would listen to it and that they would understand that this was a difficult, hard decision to make. It wasn't something I just did willy-nilly, But I have a feeling that if they did listen, it was more like, oh, that's so sad,
Right. Let's pray harder for her.
Exactly. So I have no idea, but it's out there. Again, I can't force them to interpret the song one way or another. That's up to them.
Right.
If they listen to it.
Absolutely.
So, that's always interesting to put out very vulnerable thoughts, feelings, ideas, and just hope that it's received positively.
Yeah. And also, I think you also have to be in that space to do that, of also understanding that some people aren't going to receive it positively, and that's okay. Like, because the people that it's supposed to resonate with, it will. That's one of the things I've learned about just running a social media account. Overall, it's received very positively, but every now and then it's not, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, totally. And like I've definitely had friends and family who have like unfollowed and all that stuff, which it's hard, but that is like something you have to deal with if you decide to be open about it. That's just of course that's going to happen because of what the Mormon church teaches. So it's sad, but it's reality. So
it is reality. But one of the things I've found repeatedly over and over is that we don't know who's watching. We don't know who's paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
More than once in my journey over the last 2 years, several times in fact, I have had family members or friends who I never would have suspected come to me privately and say, I feel the same way. Thanks for being brave. Or disclose things to me that they haven't disclosed to other people because they find me to be a safe person to disclose to because I've been open and vulnerable with my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I say this just, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean those people are going to come out and renounce Mormonism the next day, but they know they've got somebody in their corner. And even if you have family or friends that follow you that are still very entrenched, the day may come where they start questioning or decide to get out, and they're going to know without a doubt you're a safe person for them to come to.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And yeah, I've mentioned before, but like I've definitely found a community through social media, like you said, of people I never would have expected, you know, to leave or to have questions or to be nuanced, you know. And that has been very validating and just comforting to know that that the Mormon Church hasn't silenced everybody, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's scary. I had a friend who is still in the church. I told her that I left because I don't remember exactly. She asked a question and I couldn't really answer it without telling her.
Yeah.
And which I was fine with. And she was just asking me about it. She's very kind, very open-minded. So I was just telling her how difficult it was. And she was surprised by that. She was like, "What do you mean?" And I was surprised by that. I was like, "What do you mean?" You know, like everything about it is difficult, but I just don't think like that really was kind of a light bulb. But I was like, oh, members really don't understand how tough it is, that it's not just, I'm bored with this, or I'm a lazy learner, or you know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
Like, it is grueling.
Yes.
And you really go through it, you know?
Yep.
And so I
think that's the assumption that everybody makes is just, oh, well, you just wanted to sin, so you just decided to give it up one day. Or you just wanted to drink alcohol, so you decided, or you wanted to, you know, whatever. Like, they don't understand the deep dive. Like, most of us will say we wanted it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted it to, everything to be okay. This is the hardest thing in the world, to upend your entire identity.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not done willy-nilly. It's not, oh man.
Right. And like of course I it would be so much what's the word I'm looking for? Way less stress on me and with my family relationships if I really believed it were to be true and I could have stayed, you know? Like, of course I would want it. I would want the least amount of stress on my familial relationships, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm not choosing to put myself and my family through all of this because I'm bored or because I'm lazy or whatever it is, you know?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. It's just, I think that is the worst, the absolute hardest part is just the family stuff and knowing just nobody in the church will fully see us or understand us until they leave themselves.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest conclusions I had to come to. is coming to a place of radical acceptance about how other people are going to see me. I have no control over it.
Yeah.
I can't change it. It is what it is. And just really have, literally, that's what it had to come down to, was just radical acceptance. And it's hard. Yeah.
It's so hard. I'm struggling so bad with that still, and I'm sure I will for a very long time. But just knowing, I'm like, I know how my family sees me. I can't do anything about it. It's sad that there is something blocking their vision, right? To be able to fully see me and accept me and love me fully, right? They can say that they love me, but there's always that condition that I broke, you know?
Yep.
So there will always be something unless any of them leave. And then they'll fully understand and they'll fully get it.
Yep.
But at the same time, I don't want to give up any of myself to, how do I say this? There are certain situations with my family where I have to watch what I say, you know? I feel like that's a double standard that we have to deal with being around members. Is I feel like they're allowed to say whatever they want, and we don't really have that same privilege.
Correct.
And so there's a piece of me that wants to change a little bit in order to alleviate some of the awkwardness and the just tension. But then I feel so untrue to myself and
it's
not
self-betrayal.
genuine. Exactly. So I'm not going to, I don't want to betray myself to help everyone else feel more comfortable that I am out of the church, out of the Mormon church.
Yep. Right.
So there's a lot of give and take that I haven't figured out yet. And I think that's going to take a long time, but I think that's okay as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so
and
difficult.
once you come out and you understand like who you really are, and I'm going to pull a phrase from Mormonism that might be triggery, but I'm reclaiming it. When you really understand at a soul level your divine worth, and your divine worth has nothing to do with Mormonism. When you understand that, it becomes nearly impossible to continue down any path that involves self-betrayal.
Yeah.
Because you're worth so much more than that. You
don't have to hide anymore.
No.
You don't have to hide. And that is...
And it's damaging when you do.
It is. I feel like, you're just falling back into those old patterns that you were raised in, you know?
Yep.
And I just feel like I mostly now just feel sadness, right? Like I talked about how I was angry for a long time. I've moved past that feeling of constant anger, and now it is like the sadness and the grief with peace. And I know that makes probably no sense to anybody who's still in the church and hears this, but I feel at peace knowing that I am living like as congruently as I possibly can with myself. And I also feel sadness that my family may never fully understand me, and my loved ones may never fully understand me, and they may feel some shame around me being part of the family or whatever it is. Both are true. You know, that's hard to reckon with, but both are true.
I love that you said that just now. I was going to say that. Both of those things are allowed to exist simultaneously. You can feel grief and peace, sadness and peace. They can exist simultaneously. That was hard for me coming out of the church because I was such a black and white thinker when I was in the church. It was very much this or that. There was never this and that, because we were kind of taught, take a stand, right? You're either with us or you're against us. There's not there's not a middle ground. And so I love that you said that those two emotions absolutely can coexist.
Yeah. And I feel like it's important to say it's okay to dip out of that too. You know, it's a roller coaster. Emotions are not linear. Life is not linear.
And grief is not linear. We know this. That all the stages of grief that we go through. You don't just like go through all the stages and then get to acceptance and then now we're done grieving. No, it's not linear at all. Sometimes, I'm mostly not angry anymore either, but every now and then something comes up and it makes me rage. I feel just ragey about it. And then I kind of move past that and I get into more of an acceptance state. And then I might get shoved back a little bit. But the more you do it, the more fluidly you can learn to kind of wind your way through these little stages and accept them for what they are in the moment, knowing that you're going to move through them. But
yeah, that is something recently, like with this job change and everything, that I have been processing, is that like the vision of success that I was taught and that I grew up believing is wholly untrue and like not the only way, right? So like I was taught that you move linear and upward. And if you do X, Y, and Z, you do step 1, step 2, step 3, and this is how you get to your eternal glory. You know what I mean? Like this is, which is not correct. There's so much pressure on seeming perfect and seeming like you have it all together and not showing those imperfections. So when I'm like, oh shit, I'm leaving a job where I am paid salary and I'm miserable to go work I work with balloons. That's what I do now. Like that was so difficult for me to accept. I'm so happy in my new job. But I was like, in my brain, that was a downward movement.
Yes.
And that's not correct. Like that is not correct. Life is seasonal. I'm starting to understand that everything is not linear. It can move in seasons, which are constantly rotating in and out. You know?
Yes, that's so beautiful. Life is seasonal. And seasonal in a lot of different respects. Seasonal as far as career goes, seasonal as far as relationships go, seasonal as far as your age go. Like there's so many ways to see that analogy. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and like even, with my emotions regarding the Mormon church, like those are seasonal. Right now, I'm in a very beautiful season of life. I really feel like I'm peaking right now, It's a good season. And and that doesn't mean it won't change later, and that's fine. But I just feel like the Mormon church has given me so many wrong perceptions that I am undoing, will be undoing, probably forever. There's always going to be something. But I also feel like it's worthwhile to mention too that like if you're somebody who is mentally out but not physically out, that's okay too. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't have to tell anybody what you're going through, although there's a community for you. Like we're here for you. But you don't have to be open about it on social media. You don't have to tell this certain family member that you're scared to tell. You don't owe anybody shit. You don't owe anybody anything.
That's right. That's exactly right. You do you in the way that works for you.
Yeah. And there's no one size fits all, which I just think we were taught about everything. And it's just a load of shit.
It is. It's a complete load of shit. And I'm old enough to be your mom. So I'm, probably twice your age, roughly. And even now, I have been going through some kind of personal career turmoil. And some of that old messaging is in my brain about which direction I'm, quote unquote, supposed to be moving in with my career versus the direction that I want to move in. And as I've been processing this over the last several months through a lot of different modalities, I'm really, really getting at peace with this idea of seasonality, this idea of I can go in whatever direction I want, and I don't owe anybody an explanation. Excuse me. And it is never too late to reinvent yourself. Yeah. It is never too late to change your mind about things. It's never a wrong time to change your mind about things. It's okay to say, I don't want to do this anymore. Or
totally.
If you want to just up and move to Egypt tomorrow, do it. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter if it's... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and if you decide to move to Egypt and you don't like it, you have the power to make a different decision and change it again. You do.
Yes, and it doesn't mean that moving to Egypt was a failure.
Yeah.
That's the thing I think we get hung up on. It doesn't mean that Egypt was a failure. It means I felt compelled to move to Egypt. I moved there. I stayed for a time. I saw what I needed to see, got out of it what I needed to get out of it. And now if it's not resonating anymore, time to move to Greece or China or back to the US or whatever it is. It's this, I feel like it's this way with careers. Here's an example. When I first became a nurse, I worked with cardiac heart patients. And sort of the unspoken culture, shall we say, in nursing, if you're going to leave that cardiac unit, there are only two places a really good cardiac nurse goes. You either go to the emergency room or you go to the ICU. That's upward mobility in your career. This girl got tired of cardiac nursing and had had a dream her whole life to work with babies. I took a job working in a nursery with premature kids, and I cannot tell you how many of my colleagues said to me, "You're doing what? Like, why are you going backwards? You're committing career suicide by doing this." And I didn't care because it was something I was passionate about. It was the best thing I ever did because I'd always wanted to work with women and infants, and I now have been since I made that move almost 2 decades ago. But I've been going through the same thing recently about which direction do you go, which is the quote unquote right direction to go. And you're right. Things happen in seasons, and sometimes I think we get into this thing called sunk cost fallacy. I don't know. You know about sunk cost. So for anybody that doesn't know what sunk cost fallacy is, this is this idea that we get stuck in places because we've invested so much in them. So like I've invested all this money into this specific degree, so I have to stay in this specific type of career. Or I've invested all this time in this hobby, therefore I can't give it up. Why?
There's no reason. It's all made up. Everything's made up.
Right?
Like, I feel so strongly about that.
Do you feel like, let me ask you this, because this is how I feel. I'm starting to feel like, as I've deconstructed religion, the entire universe is made up.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Every single paradigm that we are involved in is made up. All of it.
Everything.
Everything
is made up.
All of it. Yeah.
All of it.
So, and then it starts me down these rabbit holes of who made the rules?
Yeah.
Who made any of the rules that we live by, and why do we actually have to follow them? Because they're all made up. You know, one of the examples that I use with in talking to friends sometimes is this idea of let's talk about showing topless photos on social media. So let's talk about that. If you are a male, you get to be topless and show your chest and your nipples, and it's all just fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you're female, or you have female breasts, and I apologize in advance for those in different stages of maybe being transgender. If I'm not getting verbiage correct, I apologize for that. But my point is that if you have breasts, female woman looking breasts, and you want to show them on social media, you have to cover the nipples. That's where everybody gets hung up on. So as long as you blur out the nipples or have a sticker over them or a pasty or something, then everything's okay. But really, this doesn't make any sense, because men have nipples too. Really, the difference between the breasts are the breast tissue behind the nipples, right?
Yep.
It's larger tissue, it's rounder. That's the difference, because
someone decided
that it was the nipple, and it makes nothing makes any sense anymore.
Mm-mm.
And in some ways that can be a little bit confusing, shall we say,
overwhelming,
and in other ways overwhelming, but in other ways it's really just kind of freeing, because sometimes I'm just like, I don't really care about anything anymore, because it's all made up.
Yeah,
all of it's made up. Or the idea that who decided one day that if you take a pair of pants and you take the seam out of the middle and turn it into a skirt, now all of a sudden only one sex or gender gets to wear that thing. Mm-hmm. Like, how arbitrary is this? And then when you look back over the course of history, let's even take history in the Mormon church. If we want to just keep this to Mormonism, if you look back at photographs from the 1800s of people in the Mormon church, the women were always wearing dresses with sleeves down to the wrists, dresses all the way down to the ankles. And in fact, my understanding is that the garments used to be full body garments, and they were one piece. So over time, things began to change.
Rules change. People decide, they change.
Things change. People change. All of this is a made-up construct that we're living in. That's my opinion.
That's my opinion as well, which is why, like, now being so far removed from, I say so far, I feel mentally that I'm far removed, right, from Mormonism. Yeah. And this might sound offensive, but a lot of it feels so silly to me. It's silly. Like, somebody just decided this, and now people actually think that whether or not they listen to this rule dictates if they go to heaven, pretty much. Like, their salvation depends on a silly rule that some guy made up one day.
Right.
And that is silly and also extremely damaging and dangerous.
Yeah.
And that upsets me. I get heated over that.
No, I have to agree. The rules, it's that whole thing again about stepping back from the painting and seeing the whole picture. And you step back and you just look at these rules that never made any sense to you. They never did. We just conned ourselves, cognitive dissonance, that whole thing. We gaslit ourselves into believing that they were legitimate rules, because of course, if we didn't understand them, we just shut it down and told ourselves to have more faith.
And to be obedient. It's a test of obedience.
Yes, everything was a test of obedience. When really our inner selves were like, come on, like, we're not dead in here. Critically think. Let's, like, get it together, because none of it makes sense. It doesn't. And the arbitrariness, like, for example, Here's another one. So if I'm Mormon, I can make a hole in my ear, but I can't make a hole in my nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I can make one hole in my ear, but not two holes in my ear, because one is perfectly fine and two is really bad. And I can't get a tattoo because that's permanently altering my body, but I can get a boob job or a tummy tuck or whatever it is. It's so convoluted, but you don't see it on the inside.
Yes, and this is like exactly what I wish so badly, like my family could see and understand, because I don't know, I look at my family and some of them I'm like, you have a very unhealthy relationship with the church. It is damaging to you and you don't see it. Oh, if only you could understand that these silly little rules don't mean anything. You are not going to be damned if you don't follow these rules. Like,
Right.
Knowing me, I know my sister. You know me, okay? Do you really think that I'm going to hell? Like,
Right.
I want them to ask. I want to ask them that so bad. Of like,
yeah,
I'm not a bad person, right? Whatever, bad in quotes, whatever the hell that means.
Right.
Do you really think I deserve hell? Whatever hell is, right? I don't believe there's a hell, but
same.
I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And I think they would say no, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't need. Okay, then why can't you do the same things as me? You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. And I wish they saw that, like, your salvation, whatever salvation
whatever
means,
that
right?
is. Yeah.
Does not depend on you being stuck in fear, because that's all I see.
So that to me is the whole crux of Mormonism: fear and shame. It's fear and shame, fear and shame. Guilt. Everything is steeped in fear, guilt, and shame. And I mean, there's debate among people about whether the leaders at the top actually know that this is all a farce.
Right. Yeah.
But let's say they do, for argument's sake. Let's just say the guys at the top all know that this is a farce. It's a fucking brilliant plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you keep people steeped in fear and guilt and shame, you've got robots that will continue to show up, pay their money, do what you need them to do, and stay in line. It's a fantastic business plan. I say this all the time. I posted something on my social media a couple weeks ago about how I had, because my name is still on the records of the church. For personal reasons that I can get into another time, I've chosen not to remove them, remove my records. So I still get emails from the ward. And sure enough, here comes this email from the stake. Oh, it's our ward's turn to volunteer to clean the temple. So
I saw this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm reading this thing and I'm like, it's for an entire week. They needed 30 volunteers per night. I think it was Monday through Friday or Tuesday through Friday, Tuesday through Saturday, whatever it was. 30 a night, show up at 9:30 at night and plan to be there for 2.5 hours.
Jeez.
And I'm like doing the math on this thinking, you want people to show up at 9:30 at night and work until midnight on a weeknight while they get the privilege of paying for a babysitter to stay with their kids so they can do this. You've got billions of dollars in the coffers, and you're going to tell your members to do this. But then what you'll do is you'll frame it as service. You'll frame it as blessings. And this is how you'll,
obedience.
This is like the most, I tell people, I'm in the wrong business. If I really want to do well for myself, I should just start a religion, because this is brilliant. And the way I ended this post was, good job, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Really good business plan. Make the members pay you to come and clean for them.
For real.
It's brilliant.
It is. And I remember like connecting the dots about tithing, right? I had a huge testimony in tithing. I paid it always. I was very good. Yep. And then when I started doing research and all the dots are connecting and I'm stepping further back to see the picture. And I was like, wait a second, I have to pay to get to heaven.
Yes.
What? Like, why didn't I see that sooner? And like,
yes,
that's not right. And if I were to say that to any of like, hey, my sis, like talking to my sisters or whatever, in this religion, they believe you literally pay to get into the doors of heaven. They would be like, that's so messed up. Like, that is literally what you're doing.
You cannot get to the temple without paying a full tithe. And if you don't go to the temple, you can't get to heaven. So like, you can call it whatever you want. You got to pay to get to heaven. This is, it costs money. It just reminded me of something. My ex-husband, we're still friends, by the way. And I can tell things about him and he knows about it and I have his permission. I would never say anything disparaging, but it's just funny because the whole time we were married for 16 years, the whole time we were married, I used to get so offended because when it was time to pay tithing, because he's been kind of PMO for his whole life. Mm-hmm. Every time we'd get ready to pay tithing, he would say, time to pay the country club dues. And I would just get so offended. I'd be like, don't be so sacrilegious. This is a sacred thing that we have to do. And he's like, why? He called it paying the country club dues and he called garments the team underwear.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's perfect, right? And man, I wish I could have seen the things through his eyes so long ago. It took me forever, but you're right. We have to pay to get to heaven. We pay them for our salvation in air quotes.
Yeah. You have to buy your underwear to get to heaven. You have to buy special underwear to get to heaven. Yes. Like there's just so many things.
It's so convoluted when you think about it.
It is.
You were talking about these little things about how you were trying to get your family or you wished your family could understand that your quote unquote salvation is not tied to these things. There's a little meme that floats around all the time and I love it because it sums it up perfectly, and it's this picture of heaven and Jesus is there and some person dies and it's cartoony. They get to heaven and Jesus takes them in an embrace and is holding them in this embrace and said, oh Johnny, you did such a great job in life, but unfortunately you drank coffee, so we're not going to let you in.
Exactly. Oh,
like this is it, right? It's just, and the word of wisdom is another whole rabbit hole we could say for another day, but I could spend I could write a dissertation on Mormonism and the word of wisdom and how convoluted it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I was at work the other day and my coworkers were asking me about Mormonism because I got coffee and they were asking me, they're like, I know Mormons can't drink coffee. Is it because of the caffeine? And I was like, no. And like tried to explain to them.
You can't explain it.
Yeah. And I was like, it doesn't make any sense. So like don't try, right, to understand because it doesn't make sense. And they were like, yeah, it really doesn't. And I was like, that's it. It just doesn't. So like, I don't get it. Why can you have caffeine and you can have herbal tea, but you can't have coffee, and you can have hot chocolate, but you can't have hot drinks? And I was like, don't try.
I know the whole like hot drinks is not okay, but hot chocolate, and Mormons love their hot chocolate. That's how that's their, one of our previous guests, her name's Megan. She's a friend of mine, actually. She talked about this in which she said Mormons are always trying to find the workaround. Mm-hmm. So if we can't, coffee's bad, so we need something that looks and feels like coffee. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna do hot chocolate, like with all of its like 26 grams of sugar that's not good for you at all. Let's just not drink the coffee, but we'll just drink this thing instead that's not good for us because we want to feel like we're drinking coffee. Or I think the analogy she used was, we don't like alcohol. We despise alcohol. Alcohol's bad for you. But we want to feel and look like we're drinking alcohol. So on New Year's Eve, we're going to get wine glasses out and pour sparkling cider in them so we can feel like we're normal, quote unquote, whatever that means.
Or the 28-ounce soda every day or whatever it is.
or the energy drinks.
Yeah.
Like those are okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, we laugh about it because I know here in Arizona, I know they're all over Utah as well. They're all those, the soda shops.
Yeah.
Yes. The soda shops that sell all the cookies. They're all Mormon owned. Like these are like, it's so convoluted. Like it's herbal, like tea is not okay. Coffee is not okay. But sugar and soda, free for all.
Yep.
But
totally
they're closed on Sundays. So that makes everything okay, you know.
Yeah. It just
so many rabbit holes.
There are, and it just all seems so just sillier and sillier, honestly, like every day. But also, you know, it's silly, but then it's also so dangerous.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, we laugh about it, but really the consequences
scary.
of this, this is literally killing people. So like if we want to be on, like really, if we want to take this to a serious direction, these arbitrary, made up rules are killing human beings. People are committing suicide because they can't keep up with arbitrary rules that force them to betray themselves, to deny who they are.
They can't.
This is how
they can't fit the mold that the church has created, right? Saying you have to fit this. There's
or you're out.
No other option. Yeah.
Right.
And that's so unrealistic. George and I have talked about this before because his stance, he's mentioned this before. I don't know if this is still how he feels, but he has said that like the church, even though, you know, we don't like it, it's not healthy for us, it can be healthy for other people. And me, on the other hand, I'm like, no, I think it is dangerous for everyone because, like, Susie loves the church, has a healthy life, quote unquote, you know, with the church. But then she goes and teaches young women's that purity lesson of, oh, if you have premarital sex, then you're a dirty cupcake or whatever. And that is harmful. That's not okay. Yeah. Even though Susie likes the church, that's not okay. That she's teaching and prescribing into these really dangerous ideals and lessons that's being passed on to other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm starting to get into this nuanced place where I can kind of see both sides of it now. Because I really do feel the way you feel. I feel like for a long time, there's still a part of me that feels this way. I've long said, if the church burned to the ground, the Mormon church burned to the ground tomorrow, I would sit there like Nero with my fiddle and sing songs and watch it go down and be super happy about it. There's a lot of me that still feels that way. But I also see what George is saying in that through this deconstruction process and through talking to people, I've also come to understand that for some people, it can be a good thing even if it's temporary. So for example, I have a friend has a parent. Their parent was raised in an abusive home, suffered all kinds of abuse. The Mormon church was a way to extricate them out of that and get them into a healthier, in air quotes, healthier place where they could not be in danger anymore.
Yeah.
They could be safe. And so I'm starting to understand, I think, what he's saying, that it can be good. I recently met a family through the work that I do. I just have to be careful what I say, who also had experienced some really violent abuse going on. And in order to get away from that situation, they picked up and relocated from one place to another. Mm-hmm. They understood, because we were having a frank conversation, that I'm not in the church anymore. And through this conversation, I came out and asked, because it, you know, it takes one Mormon to know one. I knew they were Mormon, I could tell. So I asked them, are you still in the church? And they said yes. And they did say to me, yes, we're still in, because for right now, it works for us. We picked up and we had to move our family out of a place that was dangerous to somewhere safer. And that provided a sense of built-in community that we could tap into, that our family had a way to connect with some other people. If we hadn't had that, I don't know that we would have had the courage to get out of the situation that we were in, or how we would have come to find that sense of community. And, you know, obviously people outside of churches figure out how to find community, but there's something to be said about the sense of community.
Yeah.
And they were also very respectful and said, but we completely understand why people leave. Like, we understand why. I tend to think they may not stay in for a long time, just based on our conversation. But
yeah.
So I kind of get it. I kind of can see both. I kind of can see how it can work for some people. That said, if it burned to the ground tomorrow, I'd be okay, because then we would have to find different ways of connecting with each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I tend to have a lot of compassion for people that are still on the inside, because I understand the brainwashing. I used to be one of those people, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely still have a lot of work to do on that one. It's
me too.
It's the whole like, it's that all or nothing thinking that the church ingrained in us, that I am like, well, if it's not healthy for me and for most people, it ain't healthy for anyone, you know? So we still have a lot of work to do on that, but I totally get what you're saying. It just, oh man. Yeah. It's hard for me to imagine that it could be healthy for anybody, especially when I hear like, I don't know. I know like my mom gets a lot of comfort from the church.
Yeah.
But I feel like it also produces so much anxiety for her, because she's constantly like, you need to, she's one of like the doomsday preppers, you know, that's like constantly like, this is it. This is the sign. You guys need to get flour. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I'm like, isn't that exhausting? And I just feel like it preys on really, like the Mormon church preys on vulnerable people.
Yes.
And that makes me sick.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying about doomsday prepping and being exhausted. Another thing I've been kind of a broken record about on my own social media account. I'm reading this book by Tricia Hersey. She's the founder of the NAP Ministry. If you haven't heard of it, go check it out. The NAP Ministry. And on Instagram, it's the NAP Ministry. One word. Nap as in sleep. The book is called Rest as Rest. Let me see. Not Rest as Rest. Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. That's what it's called. And I heard her speaking on Glennon Doyle's podcast recently, We Can Do Hard Things. I think it's the latest episode that's out there. Probably won't be the latest episode by the time this airs, but not that far back. This woman is brilliant, and everything that she says has resonated. And she talks about how this idea of staying busy, the grind, work, has been ingrained in us. It's based in patriarchy. It's based in white supremacy. It's based in religious organizations. And after I listened to this, I went and downloaded her book immediately. I'm about halfway through it, and it's mind numbing. But when she said it's based in religious organizations, this, I actually started weeping, because all of a sudden, all these dots, remember we talk about connecting the dots started coming together about, in fact, I just before we started this interview, I posted a thing on my social media account from it. And this is the quote. It says, "All of culture is in collaboration for us not to rest. This includes faith and religious denominations. The thought of not doing, even for a short time, is seen as lazy and unproductive." And it took me back to the hymns that we sang in the Mormon church. Put your shoulder to the wheel.
It's exactly
push along.
what popped in my head.
Why? Because you've been indoctrinated, right? Put your shoulder to the wheel, push along. Do your duty with a heart full of song. So don't murmur. We all have work. Let no one shirk. Like, don't be lazy. Put your shoulder to the wheel. And then the other song that popped into my head was, have I done any good in the world today? Now, for the younger members of the church, they might know that the lyrics were changed to that song. At the end of the second verse, the verse it used to end with this line, "The world has no use for the drone." And what that means is, in a hive of bees, which Mormons are very into their like bee analogies and beehives, the drone is considered the quote unquote useless bee. He doesn't have a job. He's not there to make honey. His only job is to just mate with the queen, and then he usually dies afterwards. He's considered the lazy bee. And the end of the song used to say, "The world has no use for the drone," meaning we don't have any room for any sort of laziness, any sort of rest. What are the words that we hear? Endure to the end. Not have joy until the end, or have joy along the way. Endure. This is all about endurance. Endure. Put your shoulder to the wheel. Serve. Don't give up. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. And in this book, this author talks about what this culture has done to completely damage us, because when we are so busy doing, we don't rest. And that includes resting our brains. When we rest our brains, magic things happen. This is also going to take me back to what you were talking about during COVID. Because COVID, a lot of people walked out of the church during COVID, okay? And I have my own theory about why this is. And I was one of them. I left in the middle of the pandemic. Towards the beginning of 2020, I was going through this mental, like I was a nurse, showing up to work every day, not knowing if I was going to die from this disease, because we just didn't know much about it. We had no vaccines yet. We were told just show up, because we're short-staffed. My mental health, I shut down, and I categorically understood that my body was literally telling me, you either need to stop or you're going to die. Like, stop, or we're going to stop for you. And so for the first time in my entire career of more than almost 25 years, I went to my provider and said, I can't do this. I need some time off. I took 3 weeks, almost a month off for mental health reasons, and I gave myself permission at the beginning of this time off. I'm going to allow myself to rest and sleep without guilt. If I want to sleep all day, I'm going to sleep all day. If I want to do nothing, I'm going to do that. If I want to binge watch Netflix, I started dabbling in watercolors. I bought some watercolors and I don't know how to paint, whatever that means, because art is art, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. I just started putting my brush in water and putting colors on paper. No guilt, none at all. No, I should be doing the following things. I refuse to do any of it. I am telling you, this author is correct. Magical things began to happen. In sleep, I began to think and allow myself to think whatever came to my mind. And that included deconstructing the paradigm I'd grown up in, deconstructing what you and I just talked about with all these constructs. Like all of a sudden I had time to really deep dive into who made up the rules. Why are they this way? Understanding that I've just been blindly being a sheep, going through life, just doing one foot in front of the other, like you said, the prescribed plan. And it's not just Mormonism, it's not just religion. This is our whole society is this way when you really boil it down. This is where I started to understand the beauty of rest, and it became very clear to me, and I talk about this with Kendra, my other co-hosts, all the time. We in the church, in the Mormon church, we never knew how to just be. We never knew how to be present, like truly present, like truly just sitting and doing nothing on the patio, listening to the birds, because we were always mired in, I should be writing a talk, doing genealogy. I should be cleaning the house. I should work. Like this is lazy. I can't be lazy. I've got to work. Yeah. And I finally figured out, like, I know that this is thrown around all the time. Rest is medicine. Rest is real medicine, like legitimate medicine. And the author talks about connecting with ancestors and the universe and spirit and whatever your thing is through rest. And I am here to tell you it's true, people. It's so true. But again, this is part of this brilliant business model. If we can keep people busy and working and serving and believing that if they're not doing those things, they're lazy, we've got them. We've got robots, and they won't have time to critically think. There won't be any time.
Totally.
This pandemic, I think, was the universe, the Earth's way of saying, we got to fucking slow down here. Yeah. And no one's shutting down. So we're just going to kind of shut the world down for you for a little while, because you guys are running around like blind sheep and robots, and it's not working.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things have come out of this pandemic in that people have reconnected as humans. I believe there's a global awakening going on right now. I really do.
Yeah. I feel like, exactly what you just said about just the pandemic giving me a break, right? I fully believe the pandemic was my catalyst to leaving.
Yeah.
Well, one of them, but a major one. And I feel, I know some people have had just horrible experiences through this pandemic. So I definitely had the privilege of being able to rest and take a break, right? Like from just everyday life, really. But I remember, like, we would go hiking a lot because that's the only thing you could do, outside.
Because you weren't around a lot of people.
And in Maryland, there's tons of hikes, and it was beautiful. So we would go hiking a lot. We're not going to church because you can't. But I remember being like, that's kind of nice. Yeah, not having to go to church. Yeah. And just going out in nature with George and Mona, my dog, and just feeling so good and warm. And I was like, wait a second. I feel the spirit, right? In quotes. I feel the spirit more now being outside with these two people. My dog's not a person, but she is,
Your two souls.
My two beings that I love so much. And just feeling better and like more connected, and we would have these more connected than I ever did in sitting in church, Yeah.
Yep.
And we would have these really long discussions about, what was going on in the world and, religion and our families and all of that while we were walking through the woods. And it was just, I was like, this is the feeling that I want to have in church,
all the time.
Yeah. And I don't get it from there. And that was kind of a light bulb of like, I think I can get what I need out of life without an organization that I have to pay money to, you know,
Yep.
and wear special underwear and whatever.
Yep.
That was a big moment for me, I think. And yeah, I think that's the reason a lot of
Yeah.
people left also during that time, which is like,
I've
oh, we
heard
can,
that from a lot of people. Like
yeah,
they were like, "Oh, like we're not going to church on Sunday, but like we're actually doing great. Maybe
yeah.
we don't need to be in this building over here."
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then supposedly the Sabbath is supposed to be this day of rest, right? But then it's not, because it's filled with anxiety, and you get up, you get ready because we have to look a certain way when we go,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise people judge you. And then it's 3 hours of church. I know they recently changed it to two, but it's 3 hours my whole growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come home, and then there's the long list of things that you're not supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then meetings, firesides. Sunday just never felt like a day of rest. But they called it the day of rest. But
Yeah, I feel the same. It always felt like a burden,
yeah, it really
honestly.
did. It
And
really did.
like I was a child at home and I felt that, you know, I wasn't even like the parent dealing with everything else, getting all the kids ready and whatever. Yeah, I felt that. And it's crazy because like I don't know, now well, I've talked about how I didn't really feel like we were accepted in our wards. We were known as like the Wind Girls. That was our last name. There were a lot of us. We were known as the Wind Girls. That was a big part of my identity for a long time in church.
Mm-hmm.
But I also felt, you know, the embarrassment and the guilt. Never really felt connected to the community. The way that everyone
Yeah.
talks about community after they've left the church, like they've lost this community. I haven't really felt that because I haven't really ever felt fully accepted. It always felt really like I was an assignment or, you know, like somebody had
Oh,
to,
yes.
you know, they had to visit me. You know, I just never felt the full genuine connection. Now, being out of the Mormon church now, I work around the corner from my house. So I just walk to work
Mm.
and it's, you know, I'm friends with like the people in my apartment building and like
Mm-hmm.
having a dog. Everyone has dogs here. So there's just a lot more genuine connection. And I've never felt this type of connection to my community. Like I know our local bakery down the street. Like I'm friends with her, like the owner of that. You know, there is
Yes.
community outside of the Mormon church. It was hard to
Mm-hmm.
find. It took me 2 years, but like
Mm-hmm.
we've finally done it and it feels better than any type of like phony community really that I felt in the church, in the Mormon church.
Yeah, because you're talking to real
Mm-hmm.
people in their real everyday environments and their real lives, you know?
Yeah.
There's when I say I really believe there's a collective awakening going on. I think that one of the things around this collective awakening is this idea people are finally coming back around and starting to understand that we have got to get back to community. We've got to get back to human connection with each other in the sense of community, because we are so disconnected with technology. What a blessing and a curse, right? Technology can connect us in many ways, but it also disconnects us in many ways. Technology makes it so we don't ever have to leave the house. We can just have everything delivered, which there's something to be said for that. That's good. Certainly it was great during the pandemic. But also I think that people are hungry for connection again. They understand, as you're understanding, when I go out into the community and I talk to my neighbors and I talk to the local baker, that fulfills us in a way that nothing else can. That human connection is necessary for our survival, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But it has to be real.
yeah, that's the difference, right? I feel like
Yeah.
it's genuine and it's not because somebody has to check me off a list. you know?
Right. Right. And that you can just love people for who they are, exactly as they present themselves to you, without this underlying feeling of, yeah, but your life would be a little bit better if you had the gospel. Like, you don't say that, but
Right.
it's this like little in the back of your head
That
kind of,
judgment.
yeah.
It's always there.
And it,
Yeah.
and it clouds those connections. It really does cloud them.
Mm-hmm.
It's so freeing to connect with people without that in place now. Just love people for who they are, and know and understand that they are their own inner authority and they're doing what's exactly right for them in their lives. If we could just all approach each other that way, can you just imagine what the world would look like?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
beautiful to think about, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I wanted to ask if you're okay if I just shift a little bit.
Of course.
I want to ask about your musician name and where that came from and how you came up with that, because I like it.
Okay, yeah. So, Sister Teeth. It's it's kind of a funny story. We when George and I were dating, and after we got married, his friends. So he has a huge group of friends that they've all been friends, like from some of them elementary school and through high school. They used to all get together and play Foursquare, which sounds silly, but it was really intense. Like really, it was fun. It was so fun. We used to do this. It was so fun. So we used to do this, when we were dating, and then through the time that we lived in Utah. And everybody who would play would like earn a nickname as you played. I was super competitive. So my name was Teeth. Just one of George's friends came up with that, was Teeth, because I was just really super competitive. And then it just kind of morphed into Sister Teeth. We were all Mormon, so I'm assuming that's why it just kind of morphed into that. So that just always was my nickname during Foursquare. And then when I'd always wanted to do music, but I was never confident enough. I had terrible stage fright. I'd never written any music. I just knew I liked to sing and I liked music. But I always put it on the back burner because I didn't think I was good enough or whatever. Or I didn't have it, right? I didn't have the it factor.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit here. I can't just sit here and wait for somebody to be like, hey, do you want to be a musician? That's not going to happen. Yeah. So I need to just try. And if I don't feel confident enough, I can take on a persona. And Sister Teeth is a very vicious, competitive, confident person. So I'm going to be Sister Teeth.
I love
and
that.
Take that on. So yeah, it's kind of my alter ego, but that's so cool. Yeah, that's the story.
Yeah, I ever since I started, following you and chit-chatting with you, I've been wanting to ask you that. Like, tell me about Sister Teeth. Like, where did you come up with that? That's a cool story.
Thanks. Yeah. I was cool. Like, oh, I'm gonna use this. I don't know. I never really considered it until I got serious about trying, actually just trying music. So yeah, it's fun. And now my husband has my little logo. I have this teeth logo. He has that tattooed. Very cool. He has that tattooed on his arm. I'm getting that tattooed on my arm. Yeah. My friend's getting it too.
That's so cool.
I know, isn't that so cool? So it's kind of fun. Tattoos have been fun, reclaiming our bodies and autonomy,
Oh yeah, tattoos actually. It's funny you say that, because when I was in the church, I would say all the time, I would have friends that would say, "Oh, I wish I could get a tattoo, but we can't do that." I actually never wanted one because, in my opinion, that was defiling my body, and my body was a temple. And why do you want to do that to your body? I never had a desire to get a tattoo. And then now, since being out, I have 3 of them, and each one has been incredibly intentional, very, for me, deep meaning, not that they have to have deep meaning to anybody else, or like, do what you want with your body.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been a really deep part of my healing process, like you say, of just reclaiming my body, because I did not even realize for years and years that my body really wasn't my own.
No.
I had all these rules around it that weren't my own. What I could and couldn't do with my body, what I couldn't put on my body, what I couldn't put in my body.
Yeah.
Getting tattoos has been a very healing experience for me.
Yeah. I was the same. I never wanted one until I left. And I was like, that's something that I can do now. And I got 2 at right off the bat. Not right off. It was about a year after I left that I finally got them.
Same. Yeah.
But I got one like for self-love. It just says work of art.
Love it.
And then I got a little lightning bolt, reclaiming my power.
Oh, very cool.
Powerful. Yeah. And then I have a third one that like, it's just a moon. It has no meaning. I just liked it. And I was like, that's cool too. Yeah. I can do it just because I like it,
That's part of the beauty of it, is that I can do it just because I want to do it. Mm-hmm. There doesn't have to be a meaning, an explanation. I can do it because it's my body and I feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my kids has a ton of different, just various tattoos in various places. And they have a much different philosophy about tattoos than I do. For me, at least at this point, at this season of my life, they have to have deep meaning. If it's something I'm going to put on my body, I want it has to just be very meaningful to me. My kid doesn't feel that way. They're like, I don't care. It's just a body and it's just a vehicle. Yeah. And when I die, I'm just leaving it behind. So does it really matter? I think it's cool. Like it's so cool to just,
I've had the same, right? Like, I feel like both, like it matters a lot to me to take care of my body. But then on the other hand, I feel the same of like, well, like I got one and I was like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like, same. It's just a vehicle that we leave behind. So that's okay. I can take care of it, but I can also get whatever tattoos I want. It doesn't matter,
Right. It's kind of like your vehicle that you drive in your everyday life, You can put bumper stickers on it or paint it a different color. Like, it's yours. Who cares? It's just a vehicle. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Something else two things I wanted to touch on that you had said. One of the things was about patriarchal blessings, and there was a thought that occurred to me when you were talking about, I think you said your patriarchal blessing. I don't remember what you said. Something about.
Oh, it says I would convert people.
Yes. Right. Okay. So that's right. Because you were talking about being on this television show as a newlywed, and you thought, hey, my patriarchal blessing says I'm going to convert people. So this is a great, opportunity for me to represent the church in a good light or whatnot. Mm-hmm. That made me really think. You really struck something in me with that about, I'm trying to think of the words I want to use. What came first, the chicken or the egg? So we got a patriarchal blessing that told us we are going to do all these things and experience all these things. So you will hear people say, my patriarchal blessing says that I'm going to convert a lot of people. So see, it came true because I've converted all these people. Did it go in that order? Or was it, well, my patriarchal blessing says I'm going to convert all these people. So now I'm going to drive my life, do the work in the direction that makes that happen. And the reason why I think this is important to discuss is because how many other things did we do, even on a subconscious level?
Totally.
Because the patriarchal blessing informed what we were supposed to do with our lives. Not that we would be blessed with these things, but like well, faith without works is dead, right? So if I want to see these things come to pass, I have to go do all the following things. And it made me think, like, how many life paths did people go down that they didn't really resonate with? Like, okay, here's an example. I've heard people say, my patriarchal blessing says I'm going to be a doctor. So then they went and turned their whole schooling around and started doing everything to go towards being a doctor, and became a doctor. And 2 or 3 years in, figured out, I hate being a doctor, and I'm $250,000 in debt, and I'm stuck in this, and I don't really want this, but this piece of paper told me I was supposed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It just got me thinking, like, were we really, with this whole conversion thing, how many things in our patriarchal blessings informed the decisions that we made every day?
Right.
This fairy tale document.
Yeah. No, I talked about this a lot with George too. I'm like, self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what I think.
That's the word I was looking for. That's exactly the phrase I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. My blessing, well, I read it a lot growing up.
Same.
A lot. It doesn't tell me anything super specific.
Yeah.
I read mine a lot. Mine never says anything super specific, except that it says, like, a lot of boys will want to marry you. Be careful. You'll know the right one after you complete special training.
Wow.
I never knew what that meant. I got married right out of high school.
Wow.
I was like, what special training did I complete? Like, I have no idea. Never knew. Even when I was like a full-blown Mormon,
Yeah. They're like, what did I miss out on here?
I don't know. Yeah. But like, reading mine back, it's so manipulative. I used to think it was very sweet,
Same.
and like ego boosting, really, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's so manipulative. It's like, people will come to know the church because of you and your goodness, and you'll convert people. But like, you have to be good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's so much. Like, you are just sweet and little, and like, I'm trying to remember this very specific phrase they used that I was just like, reading it back now, I was really kind of freaked out by. I can't remember it right now, but it was a lot of that. A lot of, because you are so good, and because you are a good listener, and stuff like that. Like, priming me to be obedient and do the things that I need to do to stay in the church, pretty much.
Yep.
And I was like,
I think mine said something like, the Lord is pleased with you.
yeah.
Like, as a young girl, who doesn't want to hear that? Like, the patriarch, who supposedly has this like direct line to God, is telling me that the Lord is pleased with me. Like,
mine says that too. Something like that.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, there's all that talk that goes around about how similar people's patriarchal blessings are, because
because of how they're trained.
Right. Like, depending if you get people in the same area, their blessings are going to sound much the same because they get them from the same patriarch. But yeah, you're right. Manipulative language, wholeheartedly. And then, as I tell in my own story, mine has a line in it that destroyed me mentally. I again connect the dots, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't understand how much it destroyed me until I got out and stepped back and looked back in. Mm-hmm. But there's a line in mine that says, "Be not mediocre, for to give less than one's best is an unforgivable weakness." Whoa. And so, it set me up for a lifetime of perfectionism and scrupulosity and black and white thinking, and like this whole like unforgivable weakness, unforgivable. Like, you can't come back from that. Right. Yeah. And so, it's again, what we were talking about earlier, like, these arbitrary made up things are killing people. Yeah. Like, they're killing people.
That's intense.
Yeah. Super intense. And yet, how many of us, I don't know about you, I mean, I really looked forward to getting my patriarchal blessing. Everybody told me it was this amazing thing. It's a roadmap for your life. It's like, God is giving you specific instruction and direction. Like, only for you. You're special. Like, this is just for you. And it's this amazing thing. And yeah, I really looked forward to it. And it was a big deal when I got it.
Totally.
And like you, I read mine a ton.
Yeah. And mine says like that I'll have boys. Like it specifically says it all, but we don't have any kids. But I'm so curious. It's like, what would be our future, you know? Because I'm like, I used to be like, damn it. Like, I don't know the first thing about boys. I grew up with all sisters, you know?
Right.
My sister had girls. I'm like, shit, I don't know. But now, like, that was a big anxiety that I held on to for a long time until leaving. I was like, oh, maybe I won't have boys, you know? It was just funny.
Or how about this? Maybe I won't have kids.
Exactly. Yep.
Like, there's this, that's not an option as a girl in the Mormon church. Like, even if you don't want kids, like, you can't say that out loud. Like, your whole salvation is pinned on this, you know? Mine told me marriage and motherhood was going to be my highest calling.
Of course.
So when you are told that, oh, okay, like, I guess that's what I'm doing. I guess that's it. Like, okay, I'm going to gear my life that way. Yeah, it's great. It's crazy. Like, never a thought. Like, I wonder if anybody's patriarchal blessings, especially for girls, ever said you were going to have a high-powered career. You'll be an attorney on Wall Street or something. Right.
Exactly.
I'm doubting that ever happened.
No, mine talks a lot about, it says like you'll be a good speaker and you'll be a good teacher, and I'm like, I've never felt that way. I don't like that. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm so happy being like not the manager, not the leader. You know what I mean? I'm like, why do I? So I used to fit myself into those categories because they would call me to those kind of positions. I'm like, this is uncomfortable. This is not like a learning.
I don't want it.
This is not like a good growth feeling. This is like, yeah. I'm like, stop giving this to me. I don't want it. You know, just trying to fit yourself into what the patriarchal blessing says you're supposed to be like. I'm not like most of, you know, I'm not like that.
And the thing is, there's a place for everybody, right? So one of the rabbit holes I used to go down all the time was like when they would tell you, be the best in school, like be at the top of your class. Well, somebody's got to be underneath the people that are at the top. Like, everybody can't be at the top. So does that make those people less worthy, less good, like less in any given list of people? Somebody's going to be at the bottom. It's just, it's a numbers game. What about those people down there? Like, is there something wrong with them? Because it's just this, there's so many.
There's so many. It's insane.
It's just, it's a rabbit hole that it's like a black hole within a rabbit hole. Like, you can just keep going with it. One of the other things I just wanted to touch on with you was when you were talking about living in Baltimore, when the George Floyd murder happened and you were attending protests. I wanted to first of all say good for you for attending protests and for opening up your eyes to listen and see what was going on. I fully admit when I was in the church, I did not understand Black Lives Matter. In fact, when people said Black Lives Matter, I would counter it with all lives matter. All lives matter. I would say that all the time. I'm ashamed of that, but I'll admit that. I did not understand what white privilege was. I didn't understand it at all. I didn't understand so many of these things because of this paradigm and this lens that I had been taught to look through and see the world through. I mean, come on, let's face it. We grew up in the religion that told us that Black people couldn't have the priesthood until 78.
Yeah.
That their skin had been cursed. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Like this, it's just, it's so convoluted. But anyway, my point being, I just wanted to honor the fact that you talked about this and that you have done and are doing the work around this, because I say all the time that when we come out of this high demand patriarchal system, I think it's necessary. We have to sit in the shit that we were taught, but also we have to sit and admit that we perpetuated it.
Yeah.
Whether we did it intentionally, knowingly, one of the things I've come to understand is that it does not matter what your intention was if harm was caused.
Mm-hmm.
If harm was caused, we have to make it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to deconstruct from all this, I think it's necessary to sit in a lot of these discomforts. And so I appreciate you talking about that and admitting your own judgments around it, because I think the more we do this, the more it gives other people permission to say, yeah, like that was me too. I sat in a racist church and perpetuated racism. I perpetuated homophobia. Yes, I may have said, I love you, but I sat in a system and paid money to a system that told you you were not good enough.
Exactly, yeah.
We have to own this stuff. I really feel like we have to own it. So I appreciate the work that you've done around that.
Oh, thank you. I really I have to credit George because and I have to admit as well, I would do the same thing, right? If people said Black Lives Matter, I was like that's such a weird thing to say. All lives matter. This is a real conversation I had with George in Maryland, right when we moved there. There was a Black Lives Matter sign that we drove past, and I made the comment, right, of all lives matter. And George would, explain to me why that was wrong, wrong for me to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Okay, and that is and I've talked about this with George and thanked him for teaching me this lesson, because that was a big, looking back now, that was a big light bulb moment for me leaving the church. You can kind of pinpoint those moments now looking back. That was one of them. Yeah. And so, I definitely perpetuated it as well.
Yeah.
And I don't claim to know everything and understand everything still. I can't.
No.
I came from
never
privilege.
will.
I'm white. Yeah. Yep. I cannot ever fully understand. But I can understand that what I was doing before was wrong and not working, Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's same. White privilege. I own that. This will be a lifetime. I have a responsibility to deconstruct this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm not saying this about anybody else, but personally, I feel a personal responsibility to speak about it out loud. Mm-hmm. Because there's a difference between knowing something and speaking it. And not everybody's in a position to do so. I fully appreciate that. But I feel like that's a necessary responsibility that I have. And anyway, I just appreciated that you brought that up. And
of course, it was that was a big thing, 2020. And I don't even like saying it was a big thing. That is an ongoing occurrence. Yes. But that event was just a big eye opener for me, and it's sad that had to occur for me to have my eyes opened, So I feel 100%. A lot of shame about that, but I felt the same way of I feel responsible. I am in a place where this is being the community that I was in during that time was heavily impacted by what happened. I'm seeing this, I felt responsible to share about it as well. And when I shared about it, I was appalled by the reaction of my friends and family, especially extended family. I was just I couldn't comprehend what they were how they could justify what they were saying. And so that was a big I had that big political shift, and
Mm-hmm.
also shifted me right out of the Mormon church as well.
Yeah.
But I just
Well,
couldn't.
because those reactions, there's so much cognitive dissonance around listening to what the church says about love one another, love one another, and then seeing the reactions of people or the actions. It's the two don't mesh.
No.
You're hearing one thing and seeing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And that began to just cause a lot of disruption within me. And I'll admit, I didn't dig into the racism side of things until I first dug into the LGBTQIA plus stuff,
Mm.
because that impacted me directly because I have a child that's queer.
Mm.
And so it wasn't, I fully admit, I feel like I was like a really accepting, non-judgmental person when I was in the church, but I'm realizing now that I wasn't nearly as non-judgmental as I thought.
Yeah.
When my kid came out, that changed everything for me, because all of a sudden it was on my front doorstep, and it changed everything, because I just looked at my child and thought, this is a perfect kid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't need to change anything about themselves. How is my perfect kid not fit for heaven
Mm-hmm.
because they're not attracted to the right type of person? I say right in air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the big rabbit holes that got me, like, all of it. And that's
Yeah.
what started me down the racism rabbit hole and all of the things. And now I'm even like, when I say all of it's made up, I'm one of these people. I don't even believe in the institute of marriage anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's also just a construct.
It
Like,
is. It is.
it's a piece of paper
Yeah.
that,
Totally.
I don't know. I'm just nothing makes sense anymore.
No, I'm with you. I really am. And also the comment you made about, I thought I was really like non-judgmental while in the church.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like you're not wrong in thinking that. Like I feel like that's probably how a lot of members feel, that they're really
Yeah.
non-judgmental, but at the same time, like, you can't prescribe to a church that teaches these doctrines of racism, sexism, homophobia, and still be non-judgmental and fully accepting.
Right.
You can't.
Right. It doesn't match. And that's one of those things that I'm trying so hard. I try really hard to just keep an open mind and keep my eyes open. I promised myself coming out of Mormonism that I was going to open my eyes and listen to and take in everything I could take in,
Mm-hmm.
and try to see things from other people's perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, that's one of the things I haven't been able to come to terms with, is people that feel like they can be in the church and still be allies, or in the church and if they have found a way to do that, all power to them. It doesn't compute with my brain, and
Same.
I don't get it. And so I'll say it that way. I don't think it's possible for me. I don't know how anybody else makes it work.
Right. That's I feel the same way. Again,
yeah,
those opinions can change later, seasonal changes,
right,
whatever. But right now, that's where I stand as well. It's hard for me to compute that. Yeah. It's really hard.
But at the same time, I'm grateful that those people exist, because who knows how many lives they might save by being on the inside. And like, oh, here's an example. I have a friend that used to be in a ward with me several years ago. We're still friends. We're both outside of Mormonism now. She was always this really nuanced member who would speak openly about gay rights. And she would make a lot of people in the room uncomfortable, because she would say things like, hey, I just feel like saying, like, if there are any kids or people that need a safe place to talk, I just want you to know I'll be that safe place for you. That it created a lot of discomfort.
Oh, That's nice.
She's now on the outside, and we talk about this all the time. But man, I am so grateful that she was able to be that nuanced person on the inside, because who knows how many teenagers may have felt who couldn't talk to their families about their own sexuality. Maybe that they found a safe place in her to speak. Maybe she knowingly or unknowingly saved some lives, because maybe somebody was thinking down a really dark path and thought, well, I can go talk to this person.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I say to her all the time, I am so grateful for the discomfort that she put me in while I was in the church, because when I got to the other side of it, she's one of the first people I went to talk
Right.
to
Right.
say, I understand your political views now. I understand all these things that made me so uncomfortable before. Can I bathe in that for a little bit? Because
Yeah.
I need that. So I guess I can say I'm grateful that those people exist on the inside, but I don't want to. Well, I don't want to speak for that person, but I've heard other people say they could do it for a while, but then the self-betrayal began to be too much, and then they had to get out. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm with you there. I'm like, if you figured out how to do it, then like kudos. Good on you. They need
Rock
it.
on.
Yeah. They need it. But I couldn't do it.
I couldn't either.
Yeah.
But again, that also makes me realize that we all have a place in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my place is not inside of there. I feel like I can help people and affect some change better in a different place on the outside.
Yeah.
So there's a place for everybody.
Yeah. And this podcast is awesome. You're helping a lot of people with that. So that's great.
It helps me too. It's a two-way street.
Oh,
every
totally.
time I talk to somebody who tells their story and we ramble together, it also is another layer of healing for me. So
yeah, I just feel like,
so thank you for your vulnerability.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wish, the taboo around talking, and just like the forced silence, that makes me sad. It's just sad.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel really sad about it. I think a lot of people could have an easier time if it wasn't so much about controlling image and controlling knowledge intake, right? Resources. And I wish.
Yeah, and that's why we say the more people that talk, the more it gives other people, quote unquote, permission. Because sometimes people really, I feel like they need that. They need a permission of sorts. They need somebody to say, hey, it's okay for you to speak your truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Like, nobody can tell you can't say what is true to you. Nobody can silence you. Nobody has the right to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And every time someone talks, maybe that person who's been afraid, they'll hear that one more story that'll be like, it'll just hit them, and they'll be like, okay, I am allowed to speak my truth. And it's so freeing. It's scary as hell, but it's so freeing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's scary, and because you just don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, I don't know. I shared a lot on social media for a while. I've kind of taken a break from social media in general lately, and I had a lot of close family members like unfollow me and stuff like that. They don't know that I know they unfollowed me, but I know, and I just like sobbed.
And it hurts.
It hurt. It's something as silly as Instagram, right? Somebody unfollowing me on Instagram, that doesn't matter at all. But like in the grand scheme of things, right? But it hurts. I just sobbed.
It hurts.
It does, and because you want these people to accept you and understand you and hear you out,
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's okay, because I know that through what I shared, that day, I connected with a lot of other people as well. We had good discussions about it, you know?
And you also made an impact with the people that unfollowed you, because clearly it disrupted something inside of them.
Yeah.
And that's how all of us got started, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had to have some disruption. And so you never know which of those people might come back. Yeah. You never know.
Hopefully.
So is there anything else you wanted to add to your story?
Let's see. I don't think so. I think I covered my whole outline.
Yeah. Where
Yeah.
can people find you now? Like, let us know where, let listeners know where they can find your music, or where they can find you if they want to follow you.
Yeah. I'm on pretty much every platform except Twitter. You can find me on...
Me too. I hate Twitter.
I could not get into it. I don't understand it. Anyway,
Me either.
I think I made one forever ago, but I've never used it. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. Just Sister Teeth is my handle. Okay. No spaces, no capital, just Sister Teeth. You can find my music pretty much anywhere you stream music as well. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Yeah, pretty much everywhere. And there's always a link in my bio on Instagram that will take you to my music if you would like to listen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I recommend that you do. She's got a great voice.
Oh,
and especially that one song is What Do I Believe In?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the newest one.
If you're coming out of any sort of high demand religion, Mormonism, whatever, that song will resonate with you, I'm sure. So it's just being in that liminal space of not knowing. But
yeah. Thank you.
It's been awesome talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing, because people always resonate with other people's stories. And I say it every single time. I think a huge chunk of healing comes in knowing that we're not alone in something. And so every time we hear somebody else speak about their truths, it helps us know we're not alone.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to have chatted with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe next time we need to get George to come on.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Brave enough to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let George know if he wants to tell his story, that he's welcome to come tell his story with us.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
And we'd actually love to connect with and hear from a mental health professional too. So
I'm sure
I think
would
that's
love to.
such an important component in healing too. So,
yeah, for sure. I'll let him know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Latter-day Survivors. You can find us on the web at latterdaysurvivors.org. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Latter-day Survivors, and we're on Twitter at LD Survivors. As survivors of trauma and abuse, we wanted to provide a platform for survivors to share their stories. Many survivors of all types of abuse may be able to recognize and relate to the patterns of behavior in the victims, abusers, families, and friends of the stories shared by other survivors on this podcast. Often, as we escape oppressive family, religious, and social constructs to a safer place where we come to see our abuse and all related issues, we are better able to process and begin to heal. We believe that when we share our stories with others, we can also help them to heal. It can take decades for survivors to find the courage to speak about these things. If it is so hard for adults, imagine how difficult it is for a child to speak up. We hope to normalize these discussions so that children can speak to adults earlier. As adults, we must listen and recognize the severity of the abuse, its potential consequences, and the need for action to stop the abuse as early as possible. Just knowing we are not alone, that there are other people who have felt and do feel the same or have endured similar experiences in life, can remind us that we are not alone in this.
Oh my child. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. All your life you've tried to be a good man inside. Did everything that you thought you should. Didn't seem to do you any good. I know you've tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up.